PCM TV is supported by Salient Systems, a world leader in video management security, and by Revolutionary Clinics, a medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Accounting Buds, your number one CPA specialist for the cannabis industry.
Well, I tell you what, it's Friday afternoon and I'm ready to thank God I made it through another week. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. Who else is here?
David Rabinovitz, his trusty sidekick, and our special guest,
Mr. Morgan Fox from the NCIA out of Washington, D.C. Hi, Morgan. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's been a wild week. Thanks again for having me.
No, and by the way, they must have known that every third Friday you come on our show to talk about the goings on in Washington, D.C., and you've had quite a bit. First of all, let's start with the Safe Banking Act and where we stand right now, because that was one of the big stories coming out of Washington, D.C. this week, that we are looking at revisiting that bill that was already passed, not once, not twice, but 3 times by the U.S. House of Representatives, correct?
That's absolutely right. In September 2019, the Safe Banking Act became the first standalone cannabis policy reform legislation to ever make it to the House floor for a vote, and it passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. I think the exact vote count was 321 to 103, with nearly half of sitting Republicans voting in favor of it. And then, unfortunately, the pandemic delayed consideration of it as a standalone bill in the Senate. But over the last year, the House has included identical language to that bill in 2 separate COVID relief bills that they approved. Unfortunately, it didn't make it into the final versions of those bills, but it's really indicative of the support and momentum that this legislation has. Incremental though it may be, it's absolutely necessary to start moving in the right direction in terms of federal cannabis policy reform. Especially when we look at issues like public safety, transparency, and access to capital, particularly for smaller businesses and marginalized communities that don't necessarily have access to angel investors and deep financial networks.
You know, if I remember correctly, Michael Correa, who's one of your lead lobbyists down there in Washington, D.C., he called it low-hanging fruit, that the Safe Banking Act may be the first win that you guys can go after as a positive. Are you getting feelings that there are some Republicans that may actually switch to the other side in the Senate and actually support this?
Well, to be completely honest, if Mitch McConnell would have brought the Safe Banking Act for a vote in the Senate in 2019 or very early 2020, pretty confident it would have passed. This bill has broad bipartisan support. It's pretty clearly a narrowly tailored public safety and fairness bill. It's only incremental. It doesn't fix all the problems with cannabis prohibition, but it's a step in the right direction. And it's the sort of thing that Republicans who aren't quite on board yet with comprehensive descheduling legislation can really sink their teeth into, particularly with regards to helping small businesses and protecting public safety. So, we see a clear path forward for this legislation in both chambers, and we expect Senate introduction or reintroduction very soon.
Does the Go ahead, David. I know you have something to ask, and I think it's the same thing I was going to ask. Go ahead.
No, probably not. But Morgan, off the top of your head, do you know how many people are employed directly in the cannabis sector at present in the U.S. and total employment when you consider feeder industries that support cannabis?
Well, the latter part is difficult to tell, but Leafly just came out with the latest iteration of their jobs report that showed that 321,000 people have full-time employment within the cannabis industry in the United States right now. And that is a significant number, particularly at a time when unemployment is rampant and when people absolutely need jobs and when states need the tax revenue generated by these industries. And the lack of access to banking doesn't just affect businesses; it affects employees too. We've heard from multiple businesses that say that just because their employees work at a cannabis business, they can't even get personal bank accounts, and that impacts their ability to get housing loans or even be able to get leases for apartments, to be able to buy cars, things like that. If you can't have a bank account because every bank that you're working with is going to drop you as soon as they find out that you're involved in cannabis, what kind of a quality of life can you really have? It creates tremendous barriers for basically every single person involved in the cannabis industry, whether that's employees, employers, tax collectors, people that are providing services to cannabis businesses, utility companies. It's an across the board affront to the idea of legitimate, transparent business and being able to have oversight over this multi-billion-dollar industry.
If I remember correctly in that article, now there's more employees in the cannabis industry than there are electrical engineers in the United States of America, and that fact alone kind of surprised me, but not anymore. Let me go back to the Safe Banking Act just for a quick. Does that provide the 280E will disappear, or is 280E still going to be a sticking point with the industry if the Safe Banking Act does come to the floor?
Not at all. The Safe Banking Act has no impact on 280E. What would have an impact on 280E would be comprehensive descheduling legislation. Right now, there's not really that much appetite in Congress for addressing 280E as standalone legislation or as a narrowly tailored issue. But if we deschedule cannabis through either whatever legislation the Senate is about to introduce, or like through things like the MORE Act, that would automatically take care of the 280E issue. And I think it's more timely now than ever, as the IRS is actually starting to take notice of the cannabis industry a lot more and is really looking more into their federal tax filings. However, at the same time, they also provided guidance to cannabis businesses on how to properly file their taxes to make sure that they weren't making any mistakes that could be used to ding them later. But the fact remains that they can't deduct business expenses. So, regardless of whether or not they have guidance on how to be overtaxed to the point of business failure is kind of irrelevant.
Well, what isn't irrelevant is what's going on in the White House with some of their employees right now. And for those that aren't aware of this story, it seems some younger people who are now employed at the White House have been asked to resign because of past cannabis use. And going into this election, the Democrats made it very clear that they were friendly to the cannabis consumer. And would, in fact, other past administrations have actually said it's okay if you had past cannabis usage in your record, and they were looking for transparency. But now that is not the case. And you woke up to that this morning, Morgan. Can you walk me through how this all kind of unfolded?
Well, I mean, I'd like to start with just an anecdote that might be apocryphal, but it's one that I've heard repeated several times from people that I reliably trust, that when the United States was sending military groups to Afghanistan immediately following 9/11, that the CIA did not have a single speaker of Pashto or Urdu, the native languages of Afghanistan, because every single one of the applicants had been disqualified for cannabis use up to that point, at least in recent history. So just indicative of how much this hiring prohibition on past cannabis use has impacted our ability to really have the best people involved in federal government jobs. Fast forward to today, we're seeing that the Biden administration has made a lot of purported statements about the fact that they support fairness and sensible cannabis policies, but apparently that stigma about past cannabis use still exists. And, quite frankly, it's completely ridiculous considering that 3 of the last 5 presidents, including the current president's last boss, were admitted past cannabis users. And these are people with the absolute highest security clearances and the absolute highest responsibilities of office in the nation. So the idea that past cannabis use would disqualify somebody or make somebody unfit for service in either the White House or for a security clearance is just ridiculous.
Well, yeah,
But
but
certainly,
remember,
go ahead, David.
DUIs are okay and domestic violence is okay. It's just that really dangerous thing, marijuana, those crazy people, they can't be in the White House.
Absolutely. And, we're looking at recent studies that show that cannabis consumption, or at least responsible cannabis consumption, is not tied to workplace injury or decreases in productivity. But alcohol absolutely is. So it really makes me wonder, is the Biden administration going to be asking questions about past alcohol use with regard to employment?
Aaron Smith, the co-founder and executive director of the NCIA, I'm going to read the quote that you shared earlier today. While we may not know all the details of these cases, this looks really bad for the White House, said Aaron Smith. Punishing current and potential employees for past cannabis use, particularly under circumstances where it was protected by state laws, flies in the face of the administration's purported emphasis on fairness and sensible cannabis policies, to say nothing of its very recent guidance to federal agencies in this area. At the very least, this sends the wrong message to federal personnel managers, as well as policymakers and employers across the country. How big a deal can this be? And it doesn't sound like there were that many, but even if there was one or two, it's still a story. And the Daily Beast, I believe, is the one that actually broke this. But, what's going to happen next, Morgan?
I mean, I think it's really difficult to tell. We saw the White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, trying to downplay the actual impact of this. And as I said, we don't know all the details. Maybe there were other extenuating circumstances beyond simple cannabis use. But at least from what the Daily Beast reported, it seems as if a lot of these employees were led to believe that this wouldn't be an issue when in fact it was an issue. So, I mean, just it makes me wonder about what kind of a place the White House is going to be to work if that's the sort of information that they're giving to the younger employees. But, I think it's also important to note that, these people were being honest. They were, they knew that that this could be an issue, and they were told that it wasn't going to be an issue, and then it became an issue. Not only that, but like most of these are younger people who, for a significant portion of their lives, regulated cannabis systems have been a thing. They've been a reality, and particularly in the district. Cannabis has been legal for possession and cultivation in DC since 2014. So it's really tough to say, but I would caution against using this as sort of a rubric or like an indicator that the Biden administration is now all of a sudden anti-cannabis. These orders and these personnel decisions don't necessarily come from the president. The fact that they're making these decisions in terms of staffing doesn't necessarily equate to opposition to sensible cannabis policy reform coming from Congress. And Congress was always going to be the driver on this. It always has been, and I think it always will be. Does this mean that the Biden administration is going to oppose comprehensive or even incremental cannabis policy reforms coming from Congress? I don't think so. But I think that it's pretty tone deaf when you look at everything that's going on politically and culturally in this country, not just around cannabis particularly, but around criminal justice reform and the lingering effects of being involved in the criminal justice system, or not even that, of being involved in activity that may or may not be legal in a given state, but is still technically legal federal or illegal federally.
Right. And, it's funny, it's not funny. The Emerson College poll of about a month ago talked about how the most important issue to adults, 61% that were polled, and I think they had something like a couple of thousand people, adults polled, that cannabis legalization or the cannabis reform policy was very important to a majority of Americans. They'd like to see something happen, and they'd like to see it happen sooner rather than later. And I don't know if this little incident with some young employees at the White House might help or hurt this cause. It certainly, again, brings it back to the forefront, to discussion points, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, I've been on the phone with reporters all day long, so I think that it definitely is noteworthy. When you really think about it, though, at least in my experience, politically, support for cannabis policy reform is very broad, but not very deep. And when you look at it in terms of priorities, it is usually way down on the list for both lawmakers and voters. So I would be very interested in taking a look at that poll, because that seems to run counter to everything that I've seen in my experience. But that doesn't mean that I'm not wrong.
No, and then, Emerson College, which, by the way, employed me earlier in 2020, not that I'm biased or anything. It's a very reputable school in the Boston area for communications. So I'm actually not surprised that it actually got the kind of attention that it did. And I'll be happy to share. It was about a couple months ago, but I'll be happy to share those results with you if you want. David, you got something? It looks like you got something.
Yep. So that was February 9th, Jim.
Thank you very much.
61% of U.S. adults say marijuana, yes.
Well, saying yes, but that doesn't mean that it's a top priority issue. I mean,
no, but that was the question: is what is the number one priority past COVID? So they said, let's take COVID out. In February, they said that was more than immigration, more than the minimum wage. They said this issue was important to them. More than those others. So in that regard, I thought it was an interesting poll because in comparison, and right now, by the way, between what went on in Texas with the weather, with the immigration issues on the borders right now, and COVID and the vaccination rolling out, I mean, look, I'm not that naive to know this is still a major, there's a lot of problems going on. I'm glad I'm not the president to have to prioritize what I should be focusing on or not. However, that being said, I don't think this issue goes away anytime soon, Morgan. And I hope that the work that you guys do in the trenches there will finally pay off, because there are a lot of people who are waiting to see what's going to happen.
Well, I mean, part of my job and the job of our government relations team on the Hill is to make sure that this issue doesn't go away, and it absolutely isn't. I would like to take a look at that poll, because that would be a very interesting trend reversal from what I've seen in the past. And I'm sorry that I happen to have missed it. As you said, things have been very busy over the last couple of months, both inside and outside cannabis policy. But I think that the fact that this issue is being championed by Senate leadership means that we are going to see some progress. Hopefully we'll see some incremental measures passed, and maybe we have an opportunity to actually get comprehensive descheduling measures passed in this Congress as well. It's more likely that that'll be pushed a little bit further down the road, at least as long as the filibuster is still in play. But regardless, this is a topic of conversation that is at the forefront of the conversation around criminal justice reform and around economic recovery from the pandemic as well.
Right. Chuck Schumer, I'm pretty sure, said something this week about he's certainly aware that I think he called it big marijuana, is out there, and he is aware of that and is trying whatever he can do to make sure that they don't take over the direction that cannabis reform might go. How do you manage that when there's a lot of money still being played in that space, whether it's alcohol, getting involved with infused beverages, or just straight descheduling? But I was actually pleased to hear that some Senate leadership like Chuck Schumer actually said, we're aware of it. We're going to try and protect the little guy if possible.
Well, I think that that's been the focus of the legislative efforts from Majority Leader Schumer, as well as from Cory Booker and Ron Wyden and the rest of the supporters that they have in the Senate, to make sure that the industry becomes one that is fair and equitable. And I believe he was particularly referencing big tobacco and big alcohol companies, not necessarily big cannabis companies, although those lines are starting to blur more and more as we go along. To tell you the truth, I've always sort of envisioned cannabis or the cannabis market to look very much like the beer market as we move along, where there are, a handful of really big companies that control a fairly large market share, but there's also a very robust craft industry with thousands of producers and retailers around the country that also have a very, very big market share. And I think that as long as we approach this legislation recognizing that there are going to be big and small and medium-sized players, and make sure that they all have equal access and equal opportunities to enter the space, then we're probably going to be all right. But it's going to take a lot of diligence. It's going to take a lot of vigilance. And it's going to take people like Chuck Schumer recognizing that it would be so easy for well-funded existing industries to come in and take over the cannabis industry, and that we absolutely have to protect the ability of legacy operators and small businesses to be able to enter the market effectively. So, I mean, it makes me feel good to hear those things.
Yeah, and that's why I remembered it. Makes me feel good too, Morgan. And it makes me good whenever I talk to you on the third Friday of every month on our Green Rush Live show, because we really do get a feel for what your job is all about and how challenging it is to kind of navigate through the Washington, D.C. Politicians and all that game out there. So first of all, thank you as always for coming on. And as we check the clock, it's 4:20, which is the time when we take our first break. I explain how 420 was started by some high school kids out in the Waldos, they were called, back in 1971 at San Rafael, California High School. And they used to meet at the Louis Pasteur statue across the street after school to catch a little buzz. And that year certainly does coincide with a year that I too first tasted cannabis. And there was a song that I related to. It did nothing to do with 420. It had to do with the words of the song and the folk rocker, Jonathan Edwards, who penned it. It's called Shanty. So we take a break. We thank Morgan, and we'll be back on the other side with our cannabis marketing discussion. And we've got an all-star lineup, so don't go away.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 1900. I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car. I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on every night and day. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
PCM TV is supported by Salient Systems, a world leader in video management security, and by Revolutionary Clinics, a medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry.
All right, welcome back to the second half hour of the Green Rush Live. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. Every Friday afternoon from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time, I get together with David Rabinovitz, and we fill up the room with interesting, intelligent people. We pick a theme, and we kind of talk about that theme as it relates to the cannabis industry. And joining us now are two people that I have a lot of respect for, and we are waiting for a third, but I don't want to use her name until she shows up, but I will use the name of Beth Waterfall from Elevate Northeast. Hi, Beth. How are you?
Hi, Jimmy. I'm good. How are you?
Thank you so much for coming back on. And Mike Corso is with us from ROOV.io. Mike, as always, a pleasure to talk with you, sir.
Always a pleasure to be here on Pro Cannabis Media. Thanks for having me, Jimmy.
And I do want to start with Mike because Mike has agreed to kind of be the guest anchor, if you will, for the rest of this program. And it's because Mike has done a lot of work on SEO, search engine optimization, lead generation, marketing, and bringing that knowledge to the industry. So Mike, why don't you give us a little background on who you are and how you got here and why you have so much experience, and you even refer to yourself as a solid B+ in marketing. So that's above average. I remember those B pluses. So give us a little background on who you are and how you got to this particular situation.
Yeah, I strive for B+ in basically all things in life, because I'm such a jack of all trades, a master of none. But for years, I've been in digital marketing. In fact, I was the first guy promoting music for all the major record labels when the internet was born, basically. This was before Billboard even started talking about the internet and music. But anyway, I branched out from there and then started consulting and serving other industries. I've gone, in-house. I've been an SEO lead at Gartner for a few years. I've done, long-term consulting projects for software startups. And over the past couple of years, I created this new agency called ROOVIO, which is really a sort of a consortium of other agencies that share a back office of about 100 digital marketing specialists who handle everything under the digital marketing sun. So if you need website development, SEO, paid advertising, social media, listings, reputation management, anything you can think of, we basically have teams to handle that. So I sit down with clients and figure out what it is they need, whether it's content or a new website or advertising, social media, put together a package and then essentially assign it to these teams that work for me. When I created ROOVIO, it was really designed to serve local businesses across North America. But I started getting a lot of inquiries from cannabis-related businesses, dispensaries, growers, cultivators, CBD retailers. And I said, okay, maybe that's an industry I should focus on. So I'm kind of at that point right now where it's like, let's see where this goes. But we have a good percentage of our client base in this space. Many I can't mention, but I can certainly talk to the challenges that we've experienced with them. But more than anything today, I'd like to just share some of the fundamentals, and we'll talk about that as we go along here. So the
Absolutely.
fundamentals.
And Beth Waterfall from Elevate Northeast, give us a little background on who you are and where you're at. And sure, you can even take time to plug your events that are coming up over the next 10 days in the greater Boston area.
Thanks, Jimmy. Hi, everybody. Beth Waterfall. I'm a founder and executive director of Elevate Northeast, which is a 501c3 nonprofit based here in Massachusetts. We do educational events for people in the industry and then people who are within the communities that our cannabis businesses want to operate to really try to help break stigma and introduce people to opportunities, jobs, and different products within the industry too. So, and then separate from that, I am a marketing consultant. I have an agency, Beth Waterfall Creative, bethwaterfall.com. Where I work with businesses like Vicente Cedarburg, Trella, and a few others like Lantern, developing content, branding, and business development type strategies for them to just basically get their name out and have people become raving fans of them. So I'm very lucky to be there because I used to work in the accounting and financial services world. So I'm really excited to be in cannabis. It's a good time, but boy, does it give us a lot to keep up with as far as regulations and marketing goes.
Wow, accounting to marketing. That's a huge leap.
Well, accounting marketing. So I did marketing for accounting firms. So super boring. I was never an accountant. I worked with them, but it actually prepared me a little bit because when you're in financial services, there's still a lot of regulations that you're dealing with and certain things that you need to keep in mind when you're marketing and going out to get clients. So it actually kind of made sense in the end. So, but yeah, I'm happy to be here. Much more fun than accounting.
Now there is a third person with us now in our forum, in our little Zoom forum. It's Claudia Post. We're going to see if she can turn on her video camera, but we know that she can at least hear us, and hopefully, there we go. Now we're cooking. Hello, Claudia. There you are. How are you?
Good afternoon.
And I know that you and Mike Corso know each other, and you and I have talked briefly earlier. I can't even tell if it was yesterday, or a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, but I appreciate you joining us.
That's a crazy.
Why don't I start with Claudia here and just ask her, put her right on the spot and say the challenges of marketing cannabis products and the fact that every state has different rules and regulations. How difficult has it been for you?
Okay, well, let me just start for 2 seconds and say that we are going on our 12th year in the industry. I started with a company called Smoking Hot Solutions, morphed into Most Consulting Group. And over those years, we've learned what we can and cannot say, what the channels are. And the thing is, it's really about the federal regulations. It's not particularly about the states. It's really about what the feds say you can and cannot say. And then they cascade down to, like the Facebooks of the world and all those other platforms so that we have to go by that. And it's very, very, I would say it was taxing in the beginning. We didn't really know, of course, they shut our clients down. They shut us down. So I mean, you're walking a fine line there, and I don't know what Biden is going to do. He was supposed to be sort of cannabis friendly. I don't know whether he is exactly. That's the face. Exactly. That's the face. And that's not so good. Yeah.
They've had a bad day in the White House with their cannabis right now. We just talked with Morgan Fox from the NCIA about the resignations of some White House employees who were told that their past cannabis use would not affect their job security. And oops, that
what
didn't happen.
What kind of may I curse here? That is absolute bullshit. I mean, hey, I'm going to be too late to change, right? But I mean, the thing is, what is that about? We were told one thing, now it's another because you smoked 20 years ago, whatever it is. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, that's going to be really the talk of the town.
Aren't you shocked that a politician actually changed their mind after they got in office? I am shocked to hear that.
Oh, could you imagine?
Too early to make that judgment.
I agree with you, Mike, but let's get back to the challenges of marketing in the cannabis world. Let's go to let's talk to Beth about this, because I understand that there's a horror story out there that you might want to share. And it follows up a little bit on what Claudia talked about. In fact, the fact that she's been doing it for 12 years, needless to say, there's been some changes over the last 12 years, not only on the federal side, but also in each state, and how many states are now it's legal in. But it's still going to be a challenge, isn't it, Beth?
Oh, definitely. And I'm based in Massachusetts, so I'm most familiar with the Massachusetts regs. And you just said 12 years. I mean, in the past 12 weeks, it seems our marketing has changed.
That's right.
And I'm actually involved trying to get a meeting with the CCC right now, because I'm concerned about how stifling these regulations, even though they've changed a little bit and things have loosened up for dispensaries and certain brands. But I'm nervous about multi-state operators and bigger companies that don't have the same restrictions that we have here in Massachusetts are going to be able to just do all the branding and marketing they want to do on Instagram and social media, with recognizing what Claudia said about how, the federal illegal status certainly puts its limitations on some of the stuff that we can do. But in Massachusetts, where products aren't supposed to show images of their products, how are they supposed to differentiate, and how are they supposed to get new customers and get people to enjoy their products the same way that, liquor companies are allowed to do, or that cannabis companies are allowed to do in other states. So I'm I'm working with a couple of people trying to make that change a little bit. And I do anticipate, changes will continue to come, but it takes advocacy and bringing examples to the CCC to help make that those things happen.
That while we're advocating, which I do, and I worked here in Pennsylvania with our esteemed Governor Wolf for our medical marijuana. While we're doing that, we are also taking our eye off the ball for our own businesses. So it makes us, it's really a dichotomy of, well, what should we be doing? I mean, there's only so many hours in a day. I join groups like you do, and I'm, pretty vocal, but, I have to go out, I have to get clients, I have to appease the clients that I have. It's not an easy task, this industry.
For sure. And a lot is like David asked me to talk about, or Jim asked me to talk about this weird situation that I heard about with a client. But, it goes back to, the marketing advisor, the agency also doesn't want to get sued or get in trouble. So just like we need to understand the regulations, I really strongly believe that clients need to, have a little bit of familiarity with our regulations too. For example, here in Massachusetts, a very good friend of mine was working with an agency that's indeed based in Massachusetts, and so would have a certain expectation. They produce these lovely materials, business cards, website, and all that. But the thing that stuck out was that there was a big pot leaf on the business card, and in Massachusetts, you can't show images like that. And so for a marketing agency to go through printing big pot leaves on their business cards, I just thought that was really just kind of dreadful. And then the worst part of it was then my friend showed me the card. Oh my God, Beth, we have our cards. Here you go. You're the first person I'm giving it to. And I see this big pot leaf and I said, oh my God, I don't think you can do this.
Right.
So long story short, the agency said, well, you guys approved it. So kind of, again, we all kind of take on this burden of trying to, navigate these regs.
The thing is, it's our job, I believe, to be the educator.
For sure. Yeah.
For our client. We need to say, I don't know. I don't care if you want a big pot leaf or whatever.
You can't do it.
No, can't do it. We're not going to do it for you. If you want to get somebody to do it, we're not the ladies to do it. That's for sure.
That's right. And in fact, in the state of Maine, there was a controversy about a mermaid figure illustration, part of the logo, and that got nixed by the state of Maine's Cannabis Commission, if you will. Mike, let me get to you here. How important is it for a cannabis company to create their own message and control it and push it out, as opposed to the traditional way of kind of buying eyeballs that fit your demographic?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to say to Claudia, you look fantastic for a long hauler. And I hope you don't mind me bringing that up. But
thank you so much. It really, it's been a trial. I complain about it regularly.
No.
Look like you're doing fine. But anyway, I stay in a pretty safe lane because I deal with, for instance, generating leads for cannabis companies on LinkedIn. So I don't have to worry so much about a lot of the regulations there because If it's, for instance, a supplier of equipment for a greenhouse, or a cultivating facility, or, they want to reach dispensaries, I'm building out lists of prospects and targets for them every month and just making these connections for them so that they can just conduct business, B2B, business to sell their products, their wares, their services, whatever it is. If I'm doing anything as far as, a website goes or content, and this applies really for, CBD companies, which have a real challenge, advertising for sure, posting on Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is. The emphasis there is just put up great content. History will in time serve you well. And if you work right now on putting up content, answering questions about that people have about the product, and just keep adding content, you will, without having to worry about paid advertising, you're going to just organically start ranking higher when people are searching for, and this is where keyword research, topic research comes into play. I'll talk to a client and they'll say, oh, I want to sell CBD oil. Let's talk about CBD oil. Well, I say, no, let's look at the research. There are thousands and thousands of people who are looking for answers about anxiety, CBD for their pets and dogs and cats. So you may not be selling CBD for cats and dogs, but put that content up now so that you pull these people in, they find some good information about you, and you never know, they may also be thinking, oh, I'm intrigued by this offer, this discount, I'm going to order it for myself. So there's a lot you can do without running into problems, just in terms of, getting your website optimized, tagging it properly for SEO. Again, lead generation, utilizing LinkedIn, monitoring your competitors, doing a real strict reputation management program where you're monitoring mentions of either the product, the service that's happening on Twitter and elsewhere, and also of your competitors, so that every day you can look in and say, oh, someone's saying something about this, I provide that service, let me jump into that conversation. And we make it easy from our ROOVIO dashboard, where you can just see someone mentioning either a specific topic or your competitor. You can go in there and introduce yourself. So we'll talk more about other things like that.
David, I don't want to dominate. I want to give you an opportunity to get in here and ask some questions. So this is your time. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. Now wake me up from my nap, Jimmy. So a new company trying to select a marketing agency, right? They're just getting started, and we know this is not a business where you say, I grew up in this business. I worked in my dad's shop, or I hung around with my grandfather. This is a brand new industry, right? And it's one of the few. This is the first time in the U.S. where we've had an industry legal at the federal level and illegal at the illegal at the federal level and legal at the state level. If I'm a new business, right, and a lot of the people who are getting into this business, at least on the social equity side, because I work with a lot of social equity folks, what should they be asking of a firm? How do you pick a good marketing firm? What are the things that you should ask in that interview? What are the things, when should your antenna go up? Beth, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So one thing that I like to remember about when you're looking for a marketing agency is that they're generally pretty good at marketing. So don't just rely on Google. You need to talk to people. Hiring a marketing agency, somebody that you're bringing into your brand and into your culture, you want it to be somebody that not only fits from a personal and personality kind of perspective, but you want to know that they've worked with companies like yours. You want to know that they have a reputation. Like David was saying, the industry's kind of new, and not saying that somebody who has 20 years of experience in another industry and coming in looking for their first client in cannabis wouldn't be great. But I think you want to have a little bit of comfort that the agency or the person that you're working with understands some regulations, maybe has been through some of the ups and downs, maybe, made some mistakes or worked with clients that made some mistakes and kind of learned from their troubles. So I think experience is big. Really, get referrals, talk to people, go out and network, and take your time. And I'd start there.
Right. And I would add, I come out of transportation, which is a time-sensitive, urgent, detailed industry, highly regulated, by the way. And so I can speak to that highly regulated industry and then juxtapose it with where I am now. I got into this business because of my son. He's a heady glass artist. If you all know what heady glass is, it's guys and gals that make pipes and bongs that start at $10,000. His name is Nick Barnes. I'm going to give him a play. And he told me the industry needs professionals. That's 12 years ago. He said, start going to shows, Mom. It's going to blow up. And that's what I did. And I made friends all across all of the platforms in the industry, whether it's like the Cheech and Chong people, and now, of course, it's the suit and the lawyer people. But you have to be able to blend that all in. You also have to be a great resource for your client. I can recommend lawyers, accountants, anybody in between to my clients. My agency is a full service agency, so I don't outsource anything. So we have designers, of course, we're doing packaging. I'm not making bags, of course, but I'm saying it is the one-stop shop that we sell to our clients. And of course, it's connecting with them, meeting. It's just like any other sale. You have to meet your client where they are. Where are they in their life cycle? What do they need? What ecosystem of yours can you plug them into? And that's really what I have found incredibly valuable. And I say, I've been in the business, let's say 12 years. And I say in dog years, man, that's a long time. So, that's a long time. But,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
no,
Mike.
go ahead, Mike.
No, I'll just add that when you try to pick an agency, you certainly want to find what their strengths are. And, in the case, like, again, I mentioned lead generation utilizing LinkedIn. There aren't many agencies who are specializing in that, especially for the cannabis industry. So if that's something that you really need, then make sure that they provide that service. Some of the other things that we do is often people will come to us and they've already sort of started to create their online presence. So we'll run a full analysis of their online visibility. We'll poke holes and say, okay, here's where you need to shore some things up. But then we'll also give them free access to our dashboard, which is like a full marketing stack. You can go in there and make sure your listings are updated on all of these directory sites out there. Make sure your Google My Business listing, especially if you're a dispensary, make sure that that's optimized. Make sure that you're posting regularly to that. So you really got to find, people who have strengths in areas that you are, searching for at that time.
How long does it take to build a brand? I mean, and be able to get traction. Let's say you're opening up a dispensary. Because I talk to people who think that I'm going to do some advertising, and then once I've done it, people are going to know my brand. And I'm constantly telling people in Massachusetts, we're going to have, my prediction had been for a year, we're going to have 350 retail stores. I think it's actually going to go higher than that based upon some data I was looking at of approved retailers. But you can't have more than 3 under common ownership. And I keep trying to explain to people, it's not like Dunkin' Donuts, where up in the Northeast, at least, we have one on every corner. We have more Dunkin' Donuts than we have traffic lights in Massachusetts. It's just the way it is, right? But when you only have, if you got 300, think about it, if you have 350 retail stores and you own the maximum of 3, how do you get your voice out?
Yeah.
Well, what's going to happen? Analogy of my old business. There were many services. That's what I come out of. You know them in Massachusetts. Everybody knows them in New York, wherever. Courier service, guys and gals on bikes. Okay. There were hundreds of them, hundreds. And what happened? Just like any other industry, there's a lot of consolidation. I myself did a roll up with 12 companies. So I understand that's what's going to happen here. They won't be able to survive. I don't care. You can, whatever. They're not going to be able to survive. Too competitive. My humble.
No, that's all good points. And really those who are very customer focused, customer centric, those who are going the extra mile to not only answer questions by just putting out great content, but doing the follow-up. If you're not doing 360 marketing where you're communicating with your customers and prospects via email, SMS, Facebook messaging, Google messaging, you're going to lose out. You've got to just constantly be out front, putting out good, useful information. Because again, these are a lot of people who have questions about this product. There are it used to be 5 years ago, it was just like, okay, guys in their 20s and 30s. Now it's we call it this Canna Curious group, which is like soccer moms and everyone else, and now senior citizens.
Lots
With a lot of people with a lot of questions. And the ones who, for brand building, David, the ones who are really genuine and come out and provide good value and show, real interest in answering those questions are the ones who are going to win.
Mike, I just want to say, you and I and Beth are here, we want to serve our clients and we want to make a buck, God forbid. The problem is that all those wonderful things cost money. So somebody could open up a store and they don't understand. I mean, I'm always educating people. And in the beginning, it was ridiculous. I would say, I own a marketing agency. They would say, we don't need marketing. Look at all the money I have in my pocket. This was the Cheech and Chong era. I said, you know what's going to happen? You're going to be washed away because bigger people are going to come in. They're going to spend more bucks and you're done. And that was true. And I still believe that if people don't understand that they have to have a marketing budget, not $1,000 a month. I mean, they're going to have to spend bucks. And if they haven't thought about it, again, they'll be washed away on the dock. That's just, again, my humble opinion.
True.
But access to capital is always a challenge. I don't care what stage you're in, and identifying, what percentage of your net you can actually push towards marketing. So again, most of these companies are startups and they don't have access to that capital. How can you get creative with your marketing, with your messaging, with the content you share with the public to effectively build your own brand? And Beth, I'm gonna go with you there, and I'm also gonna add a little caveat there. I think we've been focused a lot on the plant touching aspects of this industry. There are so many ancillary companies and industries out there that are working with the cannabis industry that aren't so much regulated, but still have to take money from them. So again, when we talk here, let's look at the plant touching versus the ancillary group of industries. Go ahead, Beth.
Sure. Well, I run two businesses. One is my for-profit marketing agency, and the other is my nonprofit. So talk about trying to operate within a shoestring budget, right? So, I mean, this day and age, everybody, for the most part, knows how to use social. And I think that's the bare minimum. At the very earliest stage, you want to gobble up your URL and gobble up your handles and social media profiles, even if you're not going to use them as much as you're ready to. That's the first step. Just own them. Go on and claim them. And then from there, if there's somebody, your cousin or your nephew or something, if there's somebody within your family or just general network that can help with a couple hours of social media or helping you put together an email newsletter, a little can go a long way. In Massachusetts, one of the things that, love it or hate it, that's baked into our regulations is that businesses have to have a positive impact plan and a diversity plan. And I think the positive impact plan is really an opportunity to show off some of your brand as far as your culture and what you stand for goes. You have to do it. And so companies are doing things like, a food drive or something to do with the local environment, something like running an expungement clinic, donating to like Elevate's educational scholarship fund so we can send people to Holyoke Community College. Those are things you have to do as a licensee in Massachusetts. So, write a little story about it, put it on your Facebook, take a picture, put it on your social, contact local media and see if they want to show up, if there's some sort of event involved. There are some real bootstrap things you can do. Regardless if you're a licensee or an ancillary business. And I think it really starts with social media and email and having a website set up where you can collect people's email addresses and kind of start there. But then also just being a good kind of member of society, get out and network, go to events when you can, attend online events where there's little, networking breakouts, things like that. Just be a good member of the community and, help people when you can. And I think that'll go a long way, establishing your name and your brand, and people will want to support you.
Do you not feel, Beth, that at a certain point, we have taken over for many agencies who I call the agencies on training wheels. They're Nicky New Guy. They get into the business and then they, here they are. I lost you. There you are. We have picked up a lot of business because a lot of people say, oh yeah, we can do your blah, blah, blah. The other thing is we pick up is people who have Aunt Susie or Cousin Mel write a post. The grammar's horrible. There's misinformation. So while I agree with you, if it's not done in a cogent, succinct way, then people will do worse. It just bastardizes their brand. Who wants to read something that doesn't have the proper punctuation? Right?
Yeah, that would drive me crazy. Yeah, quality definitely, but you do have to start somewhere.
Hey, I believe me, I've started, and you were talking about other businesses. I started my transportation company at my dining room table with 4 people. I had warehouses up and down the East Coast. I know about bootstrapping and working 24/7. So, I mean, I get it. And also that is, that's what we do. We're entrepreneurs. We work hard.
Yeah, you make it happen.
Yeah, but you can't even play.
So Claudia, yes, we all agree. Budget. You have to invest in marketing. That's what I always talk to clients. It's not a cost. It's not an expense. It's an investment.
Investment, right?
90% plus. Exactly what you're saying. They've got to have money. But to Beth's point, there could be that son, daughter, nephew, whoever who is a TikTok star or knows how to manipulate and create a prolific amount of video. And if you're lucky to have that, you might break through. But, David, to answer your question about just brand building, you can't rely on that. But it's great if it happens. But yes, Claudia's right. And who would I be to argue against spending money on marketing?
Of course.
But Jimmy, I just wanted to follow up because you talked about it. These ancillary, or what'd you say, accessory?
No, ancillary.
Non-plant touching and plant touching is probably the easiest way.
Right. So when I talk about like hardware companies, the companies that are providing equipment, let's say, to just grow better, test better, again, that goes to what I was talking about in terms of using LinkedIn to generate leads and then be able to go introduce yourself to, let's say, dispensaries in particular. That's where it works really, really well.
Okay. Listen, Claudia, I can't wait to talk with you again. How do people find you? And then Beth, are going to come to you too. Go ahead.
You can email me at cpost@mostcg.com.
There you go. And anybody in the Boston area that might be a Celtics fan, the word most is affiliated with the most famous, legendary play-by-play guy that ever lived. His name was Johnny Most. And I'm sure that you didn't hear of him, but now at least you have. And they've retired his microphone because he's now in the rafters, literally and figuratively. But he was a legend in his day, and he was a big influence on my career as well. Beth, talk a little bit about Elevate Northeast and what's coming up with you guys.
Sure. So first, if you want to get in touch, it's bethwaterfall.com, and my social media handles are at Beth Waterfall. But for Elevate Northeast, it's elevatene.org. We have a couple events coming up. We actually have this weekend our core curriculum program with Holyoke Community College. It's a little too late to sign up for it, but there'll be another one. But that's just like a weekend. It's an amazing program that just helps set people up for jobs. And then next week, or on Thursday, we have our Women in Cannabis event, obviously in recognition of Women's History Month here in March. So looking forward to that. So go to elevatene.org, check that out. We'd love to see you there at the event.
Hey, Beth, I have a question for you. So elevate northeast.org. What's that?
David, you can't.
No, I can't. It's a real quickie, Jim. If somebody wants to become a member of Elevate NE, how do they do that?
Thank you, David. Again, just go to the website. There's a membership tab there for businesses and individuals. We definitely welcome the support. Helps make our wheels turn. So thank you, David.
There you go. Thank you, David.
I just joined about a month ago, Jimmy. That's
you are. Yes, thank you, sir. elevatene.org.
And there you go. And always a pleasure to see Beth in any capacity. And Claudia, I think you and I are going to have great conversations down the road because I think we both like to talk. Let's just say. Okay?
No kidding.
But in the meantime, we're going to take a break. We're going to fill up the room again with some more of Mike Corso's friends and contacts. And we'll continue with Green Rush Live after this break. Don't go away.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Hi, I'm Ben Shower, New England rep for Salient Video Management Systems. Let me tell you what makes us different in the security space. We're your trusted advisors for all your security needs. I know how complicated the regulations are in cannabis, and working with Salient Systems will be the polar opposite of that. I give free consultations and will walk you through every step of the process so that you can get what you need at the price you can afford. We're robust, we're simple and scalable. We're Salient Systems, your solutions to all your security needs. Please contact me at the information below, and I'm looking forward to being your trusted advisor.
PCM TV is supported by Salient Systems, a world leader in video management security, and by Revolutionary Clinics, a medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry.
All right, well, welcome back to the final hour of Green Rush Live. This is our regular business of cannabis discussion. Today, we're talking about marketing in the cannabis industry. It's always a challenge. I'm always joined every Friday by David Rabinovitz. Say hello, David.
Hello, David.
I knew you were going to do that. See? I knew you were going to do
Dependability, Jimmy. That's what you get out of me.
I understand. Mike Corso is with us still from ROOVIO, and we'll continue with Mike in this discussion. But we do want to introduce the other guests on our program this afternoon, and it is Guillermo is with us, but we only see his picture. I don't know if we'll get to see the video. Guillermo Bravo is the CEO of Foottraffik, and Eduardo Silva is the Vice President of Sales at Foottraffik. So, Eduardo, since we get to see you, I'm going to come to you first, and you're going to explain a little bit about what is Foottraffik. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, first and foremost, for hosting this show and inviting us along for the ride. I'm Eduardo Silva, as you already mentioned. I'm the Vice President of Sales here at Foottraffik. And Foottraffik is really a digital advertising agency, 100% solely focused in the cannabis industry. We have a history of over 5 years performing digital advertising within our industry specifically. We try to stay in our lanes and only cater to our clients out there in the retail space. And some of the services that we provide to our clients are really relating to advertising on big platforms like Google, ensuring that we're getting visibility, finding those new clients that they so desperately need, especially during this trying time of shelter in place in most areas still. We're still going through a lot of that COVID issue. Providing also search engine optimization. So that's really the discoverability of location-based. So it's that free referral, if you will, from Google, which we so much desperately need as well. And then finally, programmatic advertisement. So we do work with a lot of publishers in the space that we cater, the platform by which our clients can actually advertise their brand and build brand awareness. And some of these publishers are all of them are cannabis friendly. And so those are the three core services that we really stand behind. We've been part of, showcasing these services to the industry for over 5 years now. So we're still kind of pushing the elements there and always looking for innovative ways to really find those new customers for our retail partners.
Fantastic. Lisa Buffo, did I say it right? Please tell me I said your last name right.
Yes, and thank you for asking.
No, please, because I pride myself on pronunciation. It's one of my core principles. Talk to me a little bit about the Cannabis Marketing Association, how many members you have, how it evolved, and how challenging it must be being in this industry as a marketing professional.
Yes. So we are a membership-based organization focused on education and best practices for industry marketers. I started it, or communications professionals more broadly. I founded it in January of 2016 when I was working as a cannabis CMO at the time. And having come from tech, realized that everything I knew how to do, I couldn't execute on in this space. And so I ended up, frantically reaching out to colleagues and trying to understand, how did you pull off this campaign? What did you do when your Instagram got shut down? And what does this regulation actually mean? So CMA actually started very grassroots of a community of us in Denver at the time, just trying to really understand and unpack marketing. But ultimately, our mission is to bring a positive perception to and authentic understanding of cannabis and its consumers around the world. So we all know that marketing it's a really powerful force in our culture around our values and how we communicate that. And if CMA can help empower the industry's professionals to do their very best jobs in their 9-to-5s, that's how we believe we can move the needle. We're a national organization, but we do have some international members, coast to coast in several different states. And we are all online now, but we host regular webinars, educational events, and have a whole kind of member portal on our site that has resources for those in communications at any level of their career.
There you go. And finally, there's one guy who's actually wearing his brand. Mike Corso, you have it behind you, but Thomas is wearing his brand. He's the Vice President of Marketing for Theory Wellness. Thomas Winstanley is with us. Tell us about Theory Wellness for those who don't know. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks, Jimmy. I appreciate you guys having me on. And honestly, as a marketer, never miss an opportunity to put the brand in front of someone. So apparel is just another extension of that. I've been with Theory for about 3 years now. It will be 3 years in July, so coming up on a pretty exciting anniversary. We're a vertically integrated cultivator with licenses for retail, cultivation, and manufacturing in both Maine and Massachusetts. We started in the medical field here in Massachusetts, and we've really been fortunate in terms of our growth over the last 2 years as recreationals come online. A lot of what we're looking to do in the space is to really kind of knowing that there's no case studies that we can follow. Every day is a different day for us, and we're a team that is always learning, and especially trying to keep pace with this very, very quickly evolving industry. Everything from media opportunities to search engine optimization, and everything down to unique touch points with our consumers. So it's been a really exciting ride for us in the last couple of years.
There you go. And last but not least, it's Guillermo Bravo is here. He is the CEO of Foottraffik, and he's frozen on our screens. He's got his image up, but I don't know if he's shy about video or not. Guillermo, can you hear me, and can you unmute yourself so that we can say at least hello to you?
Yes, sir. Yeah, my apologies.
You know what? Okay, Guillermo, here's the thing. Go back on mute, because I understand now why you don't want to put a video on, because your Wi-Fi is already a bit challenged. We get that. I just want to make sure you understand I am not avoiding you. We all know in the Zoom world how challenging it can be sometimes.
Just traveling at the moment, so I wanted to attend, but unfortunately I can, yeah.
But that's good. We heard you. This is good. All right.
Okay, perfect.
All right. I want to go back to Mike Corso here from ROOVIO and start with this. Mike, you and I have had these discussions before. I'm going to start listing social media companies that everybody knows and they're familiar with. Okay. And then I'm going to end with one that's a little controversial because it is friendly to cannabis. I'm going to start with TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Reddit, Instagram, Twitter, LeafWire, Twitch, and finally Clubhouse. Clubhouse has suddenly, kind of jumped onto this scene. They are cannabis friendly. It's a networking opportunity for like group voice talk and networking, but their back end may have been hacked already. And there are questions now about people interfering with the data on their back end. So first of all, out of all those social media, do you have to be on all of them? That's my question to you.
No, what you have to do is pick the ones you're comfortable with and do them really well. So don't get overwhelmed by all and Clubhouse is a perfect example. I signed up for Clubhouse when it launched. I got an invite, I signed up, And I just said to myself, is this a time suck that I really need right now? So I'm glad I haven't jumped onto it just based on what you just said about them being hacked and maybe, you know, there are issues with the platform. But, you know, my whole point is it's all about content. It's all about answering questions of your customers or clients and finding the best way that you can do that. So, you know, whether you're just doing B2B lead generation, like I said earlier, you know, using LinkedIn, or if you're going to communicate by putting up a lot of content on your website, you know, for SEO purposes, because, you know, we've talked about this in the past. SEO is all about 4 words. They ask, you answer. People have questions about all of these products, whether it's, you know, CBD to help with anxiety for my dog. You know, these are questions people have. Yet, if you're a CBD retailer, you may not know that that's a very popular search. So put that content up. Find the other 50 pieces of content around those questions. Put that up on your site and start ranking, getting organic traffic. But as far as social media goes, I mean, you're going to run into restrictions. You know, Facebook and Google make it very tough. I mean, Facebook makes it very tough. Instagram makes it tough to, you know, mention names of products and services. So you have to kind of dance around it. You know, with our agency, we just say there's enough that you can be doing to get the foundational stuff right, where you don't have to be overwhelmed by all of these other options out there. Get your foundation right. Get your website right. Make sure it converts people into leads. You know, they're going to give you their email because you're giving them something to download. Make sure you're doing good SEO on all of your pages. Tag all of your pages properly. And just keep, you know, letting people know that you've posted this content, this information, so that, you know, ultimately, like I said, when history comes around and treats us all more favorably, you will have had a head start, and you'll start ranking high for when people are searching and asking those questions that you've posted answers to.
And of course, you keep coming back to content, and developing the content that fits the platform, I'm going to guess, is also very important. I want to go to Lisa here and ask her this question, and then get feedback from everybody else in the room. How many times a day, a week, or is there a pattern or a template you can follow for when you post your content? How do you decide how many times is too much and find that proper mix? Lisa?
So I think with any marketing conversation, the first question is, who's your audience and do you know them? And then you can talk about, you know, strategy and channel. If they're not, you want to pick the platforms they're engaging with, and you want to speak to them where they are as often as they're engaging with it. We personally will post different amounts on different social media platforms based on how those platforms are designed. So for example, you can post a lot more on Twitter than you can on Instagram without kind of getting knocked off the algorithm. And to answer your question about who you're targeting, what type of content is definitely the name of the game. But again, it's making sure you know who the audience is and what questions they're asking. And Jimmy, could you just restate the second part of that question? Because it just fell out of my head.
How often, how many times do you post this content? Is it 2 times a day? Is it once a week? Is it, you know, I get a million different answers, except when I talk to Mike Corso, I actually get a straight answer. But so, how many times do you actually post?
Thank you. So for social, when you look at platforms like Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook, Instagram, they will actually give you analytics into your audience and tell you when they're most engaged and at what times. So if you go to Instagram and it says, hey, on Tuesdays at 9 a.m. is when your audience is the most engaged, and it will literally show you in a graph format, that would be an ideal time to post. You'll find your sweet spot based on your brand and what type of content you're putting out there. But once you have an audience, the analytics will literally tell you, and it's a matter of working with them.
Yeah, let me just add that with our dashboard, with the ROOVIO dashboard, we have something called a social marketing monitoring module where we can see how which content is getting the most engagement. So which pieces of content you're posting that's getting the most shares, the most likes, and that really should dictate more about your posting strategy rather than the quantity. It's more like just make sure you're posting the right information. And I'm sure Foottraffik, Eduardo will talk about this because they post from morning till night. You'll find great information, in their profile all day long. And I'm sure they're not just doing it, haphazardly or without any metrics to guide it.
Yeah, I think, Mike, you hit on a really important point there, and that's haphazardly, right? I think that's the key to take away. You don't want to do that. You want to have some form to it, and Lisa also touched on this. There's analytics to help you, right? Whether you are using your platform, Mike, with ROOV.io that showcases the best time to post. When is your audience engaging with you? I mean, we need metrics. There's I wouldn't even call it a theory. It's just a practice that I live by. And that is, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So first things first, let's measure it. Let's figure out when our audience is engaging with us. And let's create content that really speaks to them. I think that's really key. It doesn't matter which social platform you're on. If you're on Instagram and the audience members there are more sociable, they want to engage with your brand in a more a less formal manner, then that's how we communicate with them in that platform. And we got to engage with them when they're most active. And the same goes to the community as a whole, right? So you're not just engaging with your consumers, you're also engaging the community. And so it goes back to also being able to track hashtags, being able to actually get in front of them based on some of the conversations that are already happening around your content. And then furthermore, on LinkedIn, we know that that's a more professional environment, right? So there goes your brand as well. So you want to be cognizant of that. And once again, Mike, haphazardly throw that out the window.
And I just want to add on top of that it's called reputation management, but really what it is it's just monitoring monitoring comments that are being made out in the social sphere and monitoring your competition. So you can set up these alerts. So if you have a good reputation management, platform, you can put in, okay, every time someone mentions cannabis dispensary in Salem, Massachusetts, I want to be notified. And when you're notified, that's when you go in and join in that conversation. It could be a Twitter thread. So you just go in there, introduce yourself. And that's more important than just say, okay, I'm going to post randomly like two times a day, 2 times a week, whatever it is. It's better to actually jump in where people are talking about the things that mean something to you, or again, they ask, you answer. If they're asking a question about something that you have a product for or provide a service for, then those are the alerts you should set up. I want to be monitoring anytime someone mentions this. And of course, your competitors, put in a list of 5 or 10 competitors. And anytime someone mentions, say, Charlotte's Web, and you're a CBD retailer, you can just jump right in there and say, you know what? We only charge 4 cents per milligram versus 20 cents per milligram. It's like, that's a good way to kind of get involved in a conversation and make social media work for you.
And I really like the fact that you're talking about reputation management, Mike. We just did a webinar on this yesterday. We're continuously doing webinars on these concepts, right, to educate our community. How do you actually engage with individuals? What are some of the best practices surrounding reputation management? What's really interesting to me is that Instagram, although I'm not the biggest connoisseur myself, it is such a rampant application in our industry, in every other industry. And most often than not, we see clients going on Instagram and or giving up Instagram altogether because, they're using the platform in the wrong format. Right? They're going in and trying to sell products on that platform. That's the biggest no-no. You're going to get shut down. So really be mindful of what the platform is for. Instagram is a social platform. Engage with the community. Give them content that they really want to engage with, that they want to read, that they are going to find helpful. And then, like you were saying, monitor the conversation. Be part of the conversation. Re-engage in the conversation. All of those elements are beyond important for the specific platform that you're going to be engaging in. And the same goes for, LinkedIn or insert name here, because there's so many of them.
So,
David, go ahead.
You got a follow-on question, or can I jump in?
I want to ask Thomas a follow-up question. You knew that, right? And
that was
because
going right
everybody's
to Thomas
talking
as
about
well.
know your audience. Well, this
Right.
is really, this will go for a while, I think. Everybody talks about know your audience, know your audience. Thomas, you've got Theory Wellness, which is a vertical dispensary. Okay. I've been in these dispensaries. You see 21-year-olds, you see 85-year-olds, you see men, you see women, you see a diverse group walking in the door. How do you know what your customer looks like in a emerging audience, an emerging market? Go ahead, Thomas.
I mean, it's a really great question. And I think a lot of people
That's
are.
why I wanted to ask it. And now I know
Yeah.
David will come up with one too.
No, I mean, it's a really great question. And I think there are some, I think one of the challenges that the industry has right now compared to a lot of analogous industries in retail is that a lot of the data, at least on the recreational side, we don't keep. We purge it every night. And that's part of the state rules. So what do you do with that issue? And I think you have to start looking at a lot of different areas. So, I hear everybody talking about social. Obviously, social speaks many languages to many different consumers across many different demographics. And if you start to really keep a really tight house in order of your metrics and your reporting, and you look at these things every month or so, and you start to aggregate this data, everything from what you can capture on your med patients, which you're able to, obviously with HIPAA compliance, you capture your Google Analytics, you capture all of your social channels, you start to build a model. Now, the problem, or it's not even a problem, but I think the reality of this is building a model is really great and it sounds really fun. We can learn that 25 to 34-year-olds are probably going to dominate a lot of the buying habits on dispensaries for today. As time starts to increase and we start to see a little bit more of an adoption in a social fabric, we're starting to see a lot of people who are on the fence or some of the older generations start to come and try. And I always say, CBD, it starts with CBD and then you end up walking away with, GMO cookies or something like that after a few visits. And so what I really like to do is we try to make sure that whenever we're setting up a new platform, albeit, social accounts or digital ads or whatever, we want to make sure that we are going to get some inbound information that's going to help lift the business or help create some institutional knowledge about who these folks are who are coming to visit us. In the early days, I used to do a lot of segmentation when we did keep rec data. And in the first probably 6 months, we saw this very large trend of 25 to 34-year-olds as your core competency, your core demographics. But then what started to be really interesting was tracking those numbers month over month from all the subsequent age categories. The fastest growing age category we were seeing was 55 up. And those were, I joke with my dad, who's a big cannabis, loves cannabis and is part of that old school Panama red kind of style, Acapulco Gold, loves it.
You're talking to me.
Yeah, well, Jimmy, I think you'd probably love it. My dad really was never interested in going to a store to buy cannabis because it was honestly a fundamental change to the approach of the culture. And I think what we're actually starting to see is that the diversity of products, the range of categories, and the accessibility for products to meet anybody in their cannabis journey is starting to bring that gap together. And so obviously keeping tabs on your audience is really important. But I think one of the challenges is knowing that that data set that you're building is going to evolve and continue to evolve. And so it's almost like you can't really look at, in my opinion, I don't know that it's always the most efficient way to look at your data set and say, okay, here's our target for this thing. Because I think right now at the speed at which this industry is moving, I think that's a moving target. And I don't think we've really seen any of these consumer models start to define themselves in a way that you could look at a spirits category or a lot of these other traditional types of businesses. And so my approach is always, let's make sure, almost to Eduardo's point, is that let's make sure we're capturing as much the information that we need. Let's make sure that if we're going to run a campaign or we're going to try something different, let's set some really clear expectations about what we want to get out of it. And I honestly, this sounds insane, but I'm kind of a data hoarder. My teams have to fill out the most insane marketing reports every month that I build. And we build these dashboards because we know that this landscape is changing. And the more information we put together, we may not look at everything and say, oh, look at this great insight every month. But we open ourselves up to learn from what we're seeing, knowing that this is a very, very quick moving industry.
Yeah, this moves very, very quickly.
Go ahead, David. Your turn, David.
Thomas, is Theory carrying THC infused beverages yet?
Yeah, we actually, so we just launched 2 weeks ago, High Five, which is one of the first cannabis infused beverages in the Massachusetts market. And this is actually it's under the brand High Five. And for us, this was actually a very interesting new product category. We've been watching this beverage industry explode. I had a piece in Marijuana Venture recently about the launch of High Five and why this category was something that was really important to us. I think the beverage category right now is growing at a 45% compound annual growth rate. And so we realized that there was a really wonderful opportunity because we're working with some technology around nanoemulsification. It's a very different delivery method. It's a rapid onset, a little bit more of a quicker decline, and the effects are very different in terms of your standard metabolized edible. And so we actually just launched, I have a sample can here, 5 milligram quick dose, 0 calories. It's a seltzer, really well flavored. And so this for us is a really huge part of our business now moving forward. We're wholesaling a lot of this. This is one of the first products that Theory has wholesaled. And the reason it's actually not a Theory product is that we wanted to do something that was a lot louder and flashier. When you look at the beverage industry, I know our brand is very black and white. We have a lot of very basic color palettes. When you look at beverages are light, airy, especially a seltzer. And so we're really excited to be able to kind of step into this category. And we just this past November finished a new construction, a new build for a new production facility with a modern state-of-the-art canning line that can do some serious volume. And so this is for us is a huge, huge new vertical in this industry.
Yeah, we're looking at it now. I look at a lot of the data in Massachusetts, and the Cannabis Control Commission started to track infused beverages back on February 16th.
Yeah,
February 16th, the first day they tracked it, there was just under $600 of system-wide sales in the state. By March 6th, which is about as close as you can get because the data the commission has lags, it's up to $29,000 that day of cannabis-infused beverages. It's growing quickly. Yep. There is now, I heard a story on NPR a couple of days ago in Japan and in Austin, Texas. There are bars now that are serving cocktails without alcohol, and there's a belief that alcohol consumption is going to continue to plummet, which means people are going to want something that's going to relax them. And Jimmy was a cannabis user. I used to go to meetings after we legalized marijuana for medical purposes in Massachusetts and talk to zoning boards and municipal officials. And I'd say, I've smoked fewer times in my life than any of our past 3 sitting presidents. So I figure I'm under the legal limit. Right now I'm a regular user. It helps me sleep. There's no calories. I don't gain weight with it. And I don't get that crappy sleep you get when you drink a lot of gin at night and you wake up in the morning and you're trying to get reoriented. And I see cannabis, and there's only one data point, but my view is it's good. Infused beverages are going to take over the market.
Absolutely. David, actually, one of the statistics, there's a research study that I can, that I actually referenced in the article that I did recently, where there's actually a proven 15% decrease in alcohol sales in legal cannabis markets.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And when you start to look at that in a broader perspective, then you start to see, okay, well, there's a different type of efficacy that's coming from the cannabis market on the recreational side that actually is starting to challenge some of these brands. And so you saw last week, or in the last 2 weeks, I think Shipyard just launched a THC beer up in Maine. We are seeing other brands who are making moves into the space. Everybody from Canna from out west is coming to Massachusetts. I think we're seeing this a very large growth. And I think we recognize that. And I think part of what's really exciting for us is it's not so much that when you look at the cost comparison, right? So, a can of our High Five, we sell them in 4-packs, is $15 for a 4-pack. So you're getting 20 milligrams for $15. Now, a lot of people can go to a dispensary and get 50 milligrams for $20. And so there's a price comparison and there's a price discrepancy between buying these beverages. But what actually starts to happen is, going back to the audience question, products like this, because of the rapid onset and a quicker decline of the effects, we actually joke about this, where drinking these edibles with the new technology, everybody has a story of the person who ate an edible, nothing happened, so they ate another one, and then all of a sudden all hell breaks loose, right? Like everybody on this call can probably say that like they know somebody who's this app. Right. Yeah. And
I'm one of
so
those that won't touch it, just so you know, Thomas. I just had one too many, but I'm loving the story. Please.
Yeah. Well,
2 years ago for me.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, you know, I mean, I think everybody knows this. I think this is honestly one of the most like obvious insights in cannabis, right? Edibles, people feel like it's eating a time bomb sometimes if you're not prepared for it or if you're not initiated in it.
It's not fun. Okay. It's an uncomfortable experience and it can turn people off immediately from using the product.
Yeah.
I lived through that. Back 2 years ago, the Saturday night of NCIA in Boston. My now fiance wanted to go out for a drink, and she is an absolute lightweight. She one drink, and that's the limit if she gets through one drink. And I got a sweet tooth, and we had gone to the Harvest Cup that year, and she's a marketing person. So in fact, Tom, you met her because Tom, by the way,
did the Babson panel with her.
That's right. Tom and Beth Waterfall and Blake Mensing, who's been on the show when we have other subjects. But when we were doing the social equity training on marketing, Beth Waterfall and Tom were two of the lead guests that we had for cannabis marketing at Babson. So that Saturday night we go out. We had gone to the Harvest Cup. Beth is walking around to all the booths. She's buying this, buying that. Now we got all these infused chocolate bars, and I got a sweet tooth. So this one Saturday night, I pop in a little bit. Nothing happens. 10 minutes later, I pop in a little bit more. It's about 40 minutes later. She wants to go out. I said, let's go. And on the way to the bar, which is only a few miles from the house, I'm feeling a little strange. We get to the parking lot. I wouldn't park between two cars. I found the back of the parking lot where I'd be safe, park the car. We get inside and I tell her, I'm gone. I'm worried. I can't even get off the chair.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there drinking seltzers and giggling. And when it came time to get up, I said, you better hold my arm. I feel like I'm going to go right over. And I said, either you're driving or she's getting upset, right? The usual male, female thing. Why did you do that? I said, look, I'll leave the car here. We'll take an Uber. We're 2 miles from the house. I'll come back tomorrow. But man, I learned that lesson the hard way. So my daughter said, now I have to deal with the 20-something-year-old daughter who now is going to school me on how stupid can I be. And when you go to the Harvest Cup, you're not buying regulated products like you would get if you went into Theory Wellness. So you're getting all this, even if you're getting stuff that has labels that are not legal in Massachusetts, that have servings that aren't legal. I go back and I look at it. Each square was not 5 milligrams. It was 22.5 milligrams. And I had downed in a short period of time about 90 milligrams of stuff.
Oof.
Yeah. I mean, well, so, you know, and again, I think this is
that Thomas was talking about his product and having it at 5 milligram, you know, that's an approachable milligram measurement right there. It's not something that you're going to keel over like both you and I have had probably more than one experience, right? So Thomas, I'm kind of curious to hear a little bit more about kind of the effects of the High Five product that you have, because honestly, at a 5 milligram not only has a parallel to the traditional alcoholic beverage, right? So it's a little bit more approachable from that perspective, but also, you know, from the effects.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I think that's actually one of the big driving insights around this as a category, right? So if you're somebody who had that edible experience that is like, yeah, I'm just like done. Like, I don't want to use a vaporizer. I don't want to use flour. You know, I want to find the lowest barrier for entry. You know, what's great about this is, you know, one, this is 5 milligrams. The nanoemulsification helps the THC and CBD molecules bind to water. So your body actually absorbs them a lot faster. So the onset is much quicker. So when you eat an edible, your body's breaking down 5 milligrams over 45 minutes, whatever long the period is. You do feel this very quickly. And, you know, if it's not enough to have a seltzer that is, you know, that you can drink, we also have these cans, which are actually resealable. They're child safe and they're resealable. And so the intent is that one, yeah, you can drink a quarter of this, see how you feel. You can drink half of it, see how you feel. The effects are so that you feel them in, no joke, 5 to 10 minutes. And you can cater your dose and have control. And it's also not like you're walking around with a vaporizer or, you know, a spliff or a pre-roll or something. You know, you put this in a sleeve. The only thing that looks odd about it is the fact that it's got a child-safe lid that's resealable. And I've been joking with people too, as if it's not enough of an innovation to have a cannabis-infused seltzer. it's like the first time I've ever seen a resealable can. I'm like, where the hell have these things been for these lids been for the last 20 years?
Right.
So
I want to interrupt and bring Lisa back in here because I have this pet peeve. First of all, start low and go slow. That is the mantra. That is the mantra of the Green Nurse Group. It is the mantra of all cannabis medical professionals out there. So I want to make sure I put that in there. But Lisa, I want to come back to you. One of the things that has bugged me beyond, and it's one of the reasons why I started Pro Cannabis Media in the first place, is you cannot get a public service announcement that is pro cannabis on traditional media anywhere. How is the industry going to educate those people who hear these nightmarish edible stories, or they hear other stories that were all misinformation for 80 years? How is the industry ever going to educate the public if the public is not being exposed to good education and good information?
So thank you for asking that question, because that is a great question and something we are working on. And I just want to state how
I'd like to get involved with that. When you get, I want you to make sure you reach out to me because I want to be involved with that.
I will do that right away because we are actively working on it. So I will say there's two ways in which this is prevented. One, the way the IRS works, if organizations are looking to start nonprofits to educate on this, they will block it for various reasons, depending on how you organize, particularly related to advertising. They've even instituted codes where if you tried to form an association after a 501c6 after 2018, they were actually blocking advocacy groups from forming. So there is kind of government regulatory red tape that actually prevent the industry from doing so in a proper business fashion. It's not that the will isn't there or that people haven't tried. It's that you literally can't get some of these entities off the ground. That being said, at this point, it's got to happen at the brand level, and it's got to happen from consumers, take the cannabis outside of it, or cannabis industry outside of it, talking to people around them and answering their questions. I'm sure everyone who's worked in this industry has the aunt who came out of nowhere and the cousin who's now calling either to have you go in and buy products for them or has questions that they are not comfortable Googling, that they are not comfortable, or they don't know who to talk to. So it's on us as experienced cannabis consumers to discuss it, but it is also on the brands to educate and do those types of campaigns and services in their marketing materials, in their communications, and make sure their bud tenders know what they're talking about. One of the things that's an area to address in the industry is that there are bud tenders having effectively 21-year-olds having medical-based conversations about complex issues with people who are seeking answers. And so they need to understand how these products work, how they interact with the body as best as they can as we start to, as an industry, build that industry knowledge and spread it. So it's responsible communications all around, both at the personal level and the brand level, and at the industry level as more access opens up for us to be able to put out those types of campaigns.
I like that.
I have a question about
communications. Go ahead, Mike.
I have a question about beverages. So Thomas, what are you facing in terms of intrastate and interstate regulations? Not only, as far as online sales go, what are you facing? What are the challenges that you have right now?
Well, I mean, we're producing them all in Massachusetts. They're all infused in Massachusetts, so they do not cross state lines. Okay. So, and that's reality.
And Lisa, what's the percentage, Lisa, of members in your association that are getting into this end of the business?
I don't have the data as far as like what their products are and what their plans are for the future, but we've definitely seen an increase in different types of product innovations, and we are getting more questions around beverages.
Thomas, what kind of questions are you getting, Lisa?
I mean, everything is ultimately, how do you market this? How do you differentiate this? What are you allowed to do? The same questions we're talking about today. Everyone wants to know what's kosher and what's not. So it starts with that.
Thomas, kosher, you need to call Rabbi Yaakov Cohen. He will He's been a guest on my show. He's a character.
What's allowed?
He will bless your infused kosher beverage. Anyway,
So, Tom,
as long as it's produced properly. Go ahead,
All
David.
right. Thomas, does the product have to be continually refrigerated, or you can keep it at room temperature? No.
It's room temperature, shelf stable for 6 to 12 months. I mean, it's literally at the end of the day, it is all natural flavor, water, CO2, and nano emulsified cannabis oil. Very simple.
And how do you consume it? Do you need to cool it? I mean, I know you don't have to, but typically, does you drink it cold, or just pop it open and drink it like a bottle of water?
Yeah, I mean, you could. I mean, that's the whole thing. It's like you can drink it however you want. We've actually made a point, though. I mean, we're just, when we launch a product, we think about, the full ecosystem of how someone's going to enjoy it. And so we make sure, at least in our theory stores, that we have, our vault has cold ones ready, and then our front end stores have displays, fridges out there that are cold. And so we always want to make sure that, if you come by or if you're getting a pre-order, you're going to get cold ones, just because that's how we intend it to be consumed. But if you buy a case and you don't really care, I mean, I like to pour it over ice and put it like a garnish on it and like feel fancy on a Friday night when I enjoy it. So
the other day I was working with a team that's opening up a couple of retail stores in Boston, and one of the locations they're taking over is a small bodega, which has coolers, and we started to go through what their products are going to look like, and I track a lot of that data in excruciating detail, and I showed them what's going on with infused beverages and how quickly it's growing. And it came to the discussion. One of them said, gee, maybe we shouldn't pull the coolers out. I said, if it takes off, right, and it really becomes as popular as it could, I think having the coolers is it. What's fascinating about this business is, if you're going to keep it cool in the store, you're going to want to design your store up front to have coolers in there versus sliding in a whole bunch of refrigerators, stripping them out and saying, that's how we cool it off right now, right?
Yeah.
That's what makes this such a fascinating industry, because all of a sudden a new product class comes up. And if you're an architect, you need to be aware of that, because that may impact how you're going to design the store, especially if it's not a small product, right? If you look at what you were talking about, the amount of THC in here and what the price is, also look at the quantity, the physical size of one of those cans for the amount of THC takes up a lot more space.
Yeah. I mean, and we talk about this a lot. I mean, we kind of joke sometimes that we're not planning for the next year. We're planning for the next 5 years. And, when you are like, okay, we're going to go build this new facility, by the time you're licensed and you have your construction and you're done, and all of a sudden you open, you're like, we need another, 10,000 square feet or 5,000 square feet. And, by the time you get into market, you're like, oh, this is all outdated. And, I think that's a nature of the industry right now. And, so we've been looking at, with some of our wholesale partners, of, okay, well, when we're wholesaling, do you guys need a fridge? Do you need, like, how can we help you bring this product in? Because a lot of the retailers are never had cold beverages or had to deal with something that had to be treated otherwise than putting in a vault or something like that. So
that's funny. When I was in my 20s, I was in the equipment finance industry. And one of my clients is just outside of Boston, one of the leading Italian ice manufacturers, small family-run operation. And they began to go from their storefront on the Parkway in Everett to start to sell wholesale to other retailers. And one of the things we did for them was, aside from financing all their production equipment, we were financing coolers for all the retailers, because every retailer has to have a cooler if you're going to sell slush.
Yeah. I mean, and that's all, and again, I think it's, talk about the consumer experience. It's like, if you're going to go and you're going to go buy a product, we want you to leave the store with the most, with the best possible way to enjoy that product. I love seltzer. I do not like warm seltzer. Like, I just, like, if it's warm, like, I'm probably like, hey, I'd rather just be dehydrated. So, and I think for us, we're always thinking about this, because I think it is hard to consider. And David, to that point, something that was really interesting when we were considering, fridges for our retail floors is, I started designing full 360 wrapped fridges. And it's like, well, it actually doesn't matter, because the fridge has to sit behind a counter where people can't walk around it or self-select their own beverage. So and again, I think you got to think about this all. And, I think all of the entire consumer experience is tied into these products.
No. So I want to just share something before I give it back to Jimmy, because I can see Jimmy is itching here, but I tend to multitask through these shows because I'm always getting a lot of texts as well. In Illinois, state tax collections. Now remember, tax rates for cannabis are a lot higher than tax rates for alcohol. State tax collections for cannabis for the month of February surpassed that of alcohol for the first time as legal adult use marijuana continues to meaningful transition out of illicit channels and into Illinois' regulated framework. Think about from a government point of view, how much marijuana is starting to have an impact. That for February, they're now getting more tax revenue out of cannabis than they are from all alcohol sales. Back to you, Jimmy.
Oh, it's a great thought. So here's the question for the room, and it's about billboards as a tool for marketing. Very controversial. California, I believe, just banned them, or at least banned them around the borders. Massachusetts still uses them. How do you view, and I guess Eduardo, Mike and Eduardo definitely have, I know you'll have opinions about this. So I'll start with Mike, but I definitely want to go right around the room. What's the impact of billboards? Are they effective? Are they too much in your face? How do you feel about billboards, and should they be allowed for the industry? Mike?
All right, this will be a short answer, and I wish Claudia Post was with us still, because as I said in a meeting the other day, and you were on that call, I said, when it comes to traditional PR and truck wraps and things like that, that's just not my thing. I'm all about digital marketing, so I'm going to throw it back to Eduardo at this point.
Go ahead. Billboards.
That's a wonderful question there, and I definitely have a lot of sentiments around it, and both positive and a little bit of mixed feelings. But in reality, just like Mike, the reason why I have some mixed feelings is that I like to have data. And how are you really going to measure the effectiveness of a billboard? That's the first thing from a marketing perspective, right? So it's really a real estate play in my book. So that's not my forte. I know I have bought and sold homes before, but buying real estate for commercial use, that's not my forte. So that's one of the drawbacks as I see it. However, from some customers who do employ that, and I'm over here in the San Francisco Bay Area, especially in the market of Oakland, for example, high competition for the cannabis industry here. And we do have a lot of clients that spread their billboards left and right. The cost for a billboard is through the roof. And in the end of the day, what was that?
It's a branding play. If you've got the budget and you just want to make sure you're covering all bases, sure, do it. But if you want to track and measure and get metrics from what you're doing,
you remind me so well of a friend somewhere down the line in history where, it was a doctor a lawyer, and he loved to see his name in places, right? And so he loved billboards. That was his thing. He's like, no, I just like to put a billboard there because every time I drive home, I like to reassure myself I'm doing the right thing. And that's what he reminds me of. Billboards is just a reminder that we're here, we're present, we're current, right? But hey, you know what? I'm not going to knock it. It's still a marketing play. It's still important to build visibility and presence. Now, there are caveats, right? Some states and some cities have passed bans on billboards altogether. And there's a reason for that, Jimmy. In some areas, there is no conclusive way that you can prove that above 72% of your clientele, the consumer in that area is above the consuming age. Right. And therefore, how are you going to place a billboard in a place where there isn't, right, a measurement of the audience meeting that criteria? And so I think that's where some controversy starts playing a role. Las Vegas is a great example of that. Some of our clients out in Las Vegas, we have very conclusive information, demographics in certain freeways. We know exactly what the age groups that are driving through that freeway are. But that's Las Vegas. Everybody's 21 plus there, right?
That's why it's an adult playground. Lisa, industry-wide, I'm guessing that they're just happy to have what I would call a traditional media opportunity with a billboard.
Yeah, so it's a state-by-state basis, and I'm actually based here in Denver, and Colorado has not had billboards until last January, and then they changed the law last January, but locales still have to opt in. So Denver hasn't opted in, so you won't see them in Denver, but you'll see them around town, and I've been here since legalization in 2014. We haven't seen anything since. In my personal opinion, if alcohol is allowed to do it, I'm surrounded by Coors ads of mountains and cold beer and everything is blue, literally as I look at the Rockies, then cannabis should be allowed to as well. There are billboards around town here in Colorado of actually educational campaigns that the government has put out around cannabis, particularly targeting tourists. To your stories earlier about going slow, letting tourists know you can't consume in public, and those have been effective. So I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with them, and they actually do have a lot of value for retail locations when you're driving up a crowded strip and it says, hey, down here is where you can, go to purchase. They make a difference for retail when it is a very competitive environment, and for brands that, again, are going for that brand awareness. It's a matter of doing it responsibly, but I don't think they should just be not, the whole rationale is, well, of course we don't want those underage to see it, but if alcohol is doing it, then there's got to be some way that our industry should be allowed the same access.
Hey, as that Illinois tax data gets shared among states, you'll start to see a lot of loosening of these ridiculous regulations.
Right. I want to ask Thomas, has Theory Wellness ever bought a billboard, Thomas?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's funny because, Lisa, I'll just say really quick, I lived in Laramie, Wyoming for 2 years, and Coors definitely tastes a lot better in Colorado and outside of Golden. So I'm a big fan of Coors Banquet, so love those billboards too. But we do. I mean, I think part of the challenge, I think for us has always been, the land that we stand on in terms of advertising opportunities is a really small. It's a small footprint. And I think the way that we've always looked at it is we were really early on buying billboards in Massachusetts. My approach has always been, if you can justify a high density DMA, and you can lock in an annual plus contract where you're going to guarantee a lower cost per spend, that becomes a landmark sign. As long as obviously you do your due diligence on the trackers that they use and to validate. So I think a little glitch there, but we have billboards outside of Chicopee right now, where one of our stores located. We have one on the border of Connecticut coming into Massachusetts. We're in Great Barrington.
Those are effective. Those are very effective.
Well,
so I think that's the whole
Theory's in
point.
Billboard Alley down there, right? The western part of the Mass Pike. I'm in Syracuse, right? Just outside of Syracuse. I drove out the other day. I'll drive back tomorrow. And you get to a certain point on the Mass Pike and you look up, and every third billboard is marijuana.
So it's funny. I've actually done a lot of just like DMA research around where do you actually see the highest traffic volumes in these areas. So David, actually up until exit 3, there are no billboards. Westfield is where they actually all start. And so when we knew we were opening Chicopee, we were like, okay, well, let's look at what they have available for boards. We figured out some good arrangements. And, again, for us, I mean, that's a landmark sign where I actually got my start very early on in my career in pharmaceuticals back in 2011. And that's during the time when digital advertising wasn't permitted for pharma companies. And so something that was interesting for me was to go back to some of these old school traditional playbooks to see how can you use some more traditional channels that can do age verifications. And at the end of the day, it's a landmark advertisement that you can switch out, you can change creative. To Eduardo's point, it's really hard to test visibility. We use some NPS testing. We do some in-store kind of beta tests of how did you hear or see about us. But ultimately, it's hard to say no to because of the limitations that we have.
A couple of things that I picked up just in conversation here, and I'm going to throw it out there for the group as we kind of wrap things up in the last few minutes of the show. And a reminder, coming up after this show, we always run our Weed Talk News for this week. We now have reports from a lot of Midwest states like Michigan, and we actually recruited somebody from Illinois, but we have DC, we have New York, we have Vermont, we have New Jersey. And it's really a cannabis coast to coast roundup of news from the cannabis industry. That comes up at 6 o'clock. And then following that, I'm pretty sure people in this room may have heard of a guy by the name of Jared Mirsky from Wick and Mortar. The guy is out in Washington State. He is a legend in cannabis marketing and has won a Clio Award for some of his work. I interviewed him one-on-one in an In the Weeds that we are actually releasing right after the Weed Talk News for the first time this week, and it'll be also available on all our social media over the next week or so, and of course on demand on our YouTube channel. So that's coming up in the next few minutes. But here's the thing. And Mike Corso, if you don't get the answer to this question,
Oh boy.
I'm not quite sure we're going to be able to do our interview next week. But there was a reference to a certain strain from the 70s called Panama Red. There was also a great song. Can you name the artist that did Panama Red? Anybody?
Was it the Grateful Dead?
No, it was not. Anybody? David, you're old enough to remember. Mike, you're going to remember the band when I tell you who it is. And I can sing the song. It's on my playlist. Lisa, I know you did. You weren't even
not
born in
Traffic,
the
is it?
70s, right? So you're disqualified. The New Writers of the Purple Sage.
Oh, I never would have guessed that.
Okay, fair enough. But I have it on my
That's
playlist.
fair.
And yes, that's why I figured I'd do that. And I think it was Thomas. You said your dad knew all about Panama Red. Is that what you're saying? I think that's what you said anyway. But look, guys,
Yeah, definitely.
I could have told you who sang a song called Panama, but not Panama Red.
I know that song too, but that's recent for crying out loud. By the way, anything after 1990, I forget about it. I can't remember. I do want to go around the room one more time. How do people get in touch with the Cannabis Marketing Association? Lisa, how can they find you and join your association?
The Cannabis Marketing Association.com. Social media is at Canna Marketing. I'm at LIBUFF, Lebuff. You can message me or DM me. Happy to answer any specific questions if you have some, but online is the best way.
There you go. Eduardo, how do they find out about Foottraffik?
Wonderful. If they can't find us, we're not doing a good enough job. So that's the first key right there. No, just go to foottraffik.co, and the Foottraffik is spelled Foottraffik. So that's a tongue twister. Sorry.
That's right.
Foottraffik.co, you can find us
we're going to do a make good for Guillermo. I promise I'll do a one-on-one in the weeds with him because he's been so patient. We know that he's traveling. He's in a bad Wi-Fi, whatever, but we've had him up there for the whole time. So you did a great job. And I think you should get a raise just because of, hanging in here with us for all that.
You can invite me back anytime now. I'm a big fan.
There you go. Appreciate that. Mike Corso, how do people find out about ROOVIO?
Just 6 letters, ROOV.io.
That's it. And find Mike there anytime. And Thomas, where can we find you? Obviously at the Theory Wellness everywhere.
TheoryWellness.org, Massachusetts and Maine. And hopefully some
David,
more
how
in
do
the
people
future.
find you? He has to unmute himself. He's always doing 5 things. And then, of course, his brain finally catches up. David, unmute. There you go.
How they find me, Jimmy? I'm in the upper right-hand corner of the screen right next to you. I'm like the Ed McMahon of this show.
Well, we appreciate you. Actually did a great job today. And I always give you credit because you do come up with the themes week in and week out for this program. And it really has taken it to a whole new level. Really and truly, I really appreciate everybody joining us. David, your efforts as always. Isabel Turner is our producer. Dan French is our director. For everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media, I'm Jimmy Young. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there.
Use it responsibly.
Thank you for watching. Thanks for listening. See you next week.
Coming up on We Talk News this week, safe banking for cannabis gets reintroduced to the House of Representatives. Is this the first step in federal reform? New York Governor Andrew Cuomo might be a bit distracted these days, but his legal cannabis initiative in his state is getting closer to becoming a reality as the New York Senate dots the I's on an agreement. And don't call UFC fighter Elias Theodorou a stoner. He's a pro and now a legal medicinal user of cannabis in Canada. On We Talk News next.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of our weekly roundup of cannabis news we call Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. Now, it looks like the first test on cannabis reform at the federal level will be in Congress, and it will be focused on safe banking. 3 times in the past, the U.S. House of Representatives has approved the safe banking bill, but it never made it to the Senate floor. As we know, the party makeup of that Senate has changed, with Democrats holding a slim 1-vote majority. This Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act passed by a whopping
321 to 103 vote in September of 2019, but stalled in the Senate and was completely ignored by the then Republican Senate majority. And of course, the impact of the pandemic on our federal government. Meanwhile, on Friday's Green Rush Live, that'll be live at 4 p.m. Eastern, we will talk with Morgan Fox, the communications director of the NCIA, about the latest efforts in the lobbying trenches in Washington, D.C. Speaking of lobbying, New York State politics has been consumed by the rash of accusations of sexual harassment by their governor, Andrew Cuomo. So far, he continues to thwart any moves for impeachment or resignation. In the meantime, his legislature is getting closer to passing a cannabis legalization bill. Quotes from the New York Senate leaders include, "We've gotten to an agreement on hundreds of issues. We are very close, in fact, extremely close." The last item that legislators are talking about now is the clause related to impaired driving. This could be passed even before the end of this week. Speaking of the Empire State, let's go to New York with Deborah Borchardt for this week's Green Market Report. Deborah?
This week, Cresco Labs said it was buying Massachusetts-based Cultivate Licensing and BL Real Estate for roughly $90 million, plus an earnout of up to $68 million. The company has 2 operational dispensaries, one in Leicester and one in Framingham, and a 3rd dispensary in Worcester is expected to open in the 2nd quarter of 2021. The deal is expected to close in the 4th quarter. Cannabis SPAC Green Rose Acquisition Corp. said it was acquiring 4 cannabis companies, which it has dubbed the platform. The companies are Shango Holdings, FutureWorks, TheraPlant, and True Harvest. The total initial value of this deal is $210 million, with a maximum earnout of $110 million. Green Rose says it plans to initiate an offering of $150 million. And Green Thumb Industries reported its financial results for the 4th quarter and the full year. Revenue for Green Thumb increased 133% to $177 million for the 4th quarter. That is over the same time period in 2019, and it increased 12% sequentially. This also beat the analyst estimates, which had expected the company to report $167 million for the quarter. And that's the big news this week. I'm Deborah Borchardt with the Green Market Report for Weed Talk News.
So have you ever ordered cannabis online from a dispensary? If you said yes, then chances are you know of the company called Dutchie. In fact, there are over 2,000 dispensaries using it. If you were to take a venture at a guess of the valuation of that platform, you would have to go north of $1 billion. Now, they've announced that they've raised another $200 million to boost their valuation at $1.7 billion. Amazing that they're only in 36 markets with those 2,000 plus dispensaries using Dutchie. It is a giant company in this industry that really has benefited from the essential classification of cannabis during the pandemic and, of course, online sales. Now, let's go to Michigan with Rick Thompson for our Michigan report. Rick?
Yes, I'm Rick Thompson from MICBD with this week's Michigan report for Weed Talk News. Live Life Financial Credit Union was just slapped with penalties by banking authorities in what AmericanBanker.com calls the first example of U.S. regulators calling out a financial institution for compliance failures involving the cannabis industry. The credit union still has and will hold on to 150 accounts with cannabis industry businesses, but the regulators say they failed to file important reports in a timely manner, especially those regarding large deposits of cash. The penalty imposed by the feds is a freeze on new cannabis accounts until the credit union gets their reporting in order, to which the government is requiring Live Life to install a computerized monitoring and reporting system by April 30 of this year. Important to note that the feds didn't tell them to not service the cannabis industry, just to do it in a compliant manner. In Detroit, 600 applications from legacy Detroiters have been received by the city during an exclusive opportunity window granted by the city's recently enacted cannabis legalization proposal. There are only 38 dispensary licenses available for legacy Detroiters. The head of the city's Civil Rights, Opportunity, and Inclusion Task Force, who commands the city's social equity cannabis efforts, has left her city position for a private sector job she will not name, but is believed to be within the cannabis industry. Well, that'll do it for this week's Michigan Report. I'm MICBD's Rick Thompson for Weed Talk News.
So as we continue with our coast-to-coast cannabis news roundup, Minnesota is looking at ways to modernize their existing medical program. You know, that's been in place for 5 years now. That law bans the use of flower for medicinal purposes, meaning patients are limited to buying more expensive concentrates. So now they're talking about easing those restrictions, adding opioid addiction to one of the 9 medical conditions that qualify you for a card in Minnesota. There is also an adult use legalization bill on the State House floor as more and more states are using the existing legislative process for cannabis reform. New Jersey is actually starting to move towards setting up their structure for adult use, and Blazing Bakery's Tara Masu is right in the middle of that scene. Here's her report from the Garden State. Tara?
I'm Tara Masu, and this is the New Jersey Report for Weed Talk News. A new medical dispensary opened in Paramus this week called Rise. It's their second location and the 14th medical dispensary in New Jersey. Multi-state operator Green Thumb Industries, or GTI, is the owner of Rise, and they operate dispensaries in 54 locations in 12 states. 2 more medical dispensaries have plans to open soon, Zenleaf in Neptune and Breakwater in Asbury Park. Zenleaf is owned by MSO Verano. It is their second New Jersey location. Breakwater also has another location. Their first one is in Cranberry. Also this week, the Black Cannabis Equity Initiative in New Jersey put together a virtual panel as part of Women's History Month. The initiative started a conversation about social equity for women and minorities in the Garden State. It drew a group of cannabis advocates and thought leaders, including Assemblyman Andrew Zwicker, Assemblyman Jamel Holley, and Princeton Mayor Mark Frieda. There were also industry trailblazing women honored, such as Roz McCarthy, founder and CEO of the national organization Minorities for Medical Marijuana, Makeda Marley, daughter of legendary reggae artist Bob Marley, and me, founder and CEO of New Jersey's first edibles company. Cannabis being an industry that has been heavily criticized for lacking diversity, it is welcome change to see this issue finally being addressed. I'm Tara Masu, and this has been the New Jersey Report for Weed Talk News.
Good news for our friends in South Dakota. The medicinal cannabis program can now move forward to launch on July 1st of 2021. State senators there tried to block and delay the law that was passed by an overwhelming ballot box initiative in November of 2020. Close to 70% of the voters in South Dakota voted to open a medicinal program, despite the objections from their governor. Now, no such problem in Vermont, although it's never easy. Here's Vermont's green nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan, with what's going on with their adult use initiative in the Green Mountain State. Jessie Lynn?
Thanks, Jimmy. I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Nurse Grown Organics and Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. Governor Scott still hasn't appointed anyone to the Cannabis Control Board, and neither the Cannabis Control Board nor the Cannabis Advisory Board have any mandatory medical professionals or members with any medical training and experience at all. To support medical patients, the Marijuana for Symptom Relief Oversight Committee meets at minimum biannually to make recommendations to the legislator. However, the committee didn't meet at all in 2020, and the 2019 patient advocacy report was never submitted to the legislator. That is a lot of important yet missing information that was never passed on as the state formed and continues to form its cannabis laws. A bill currently in favor in legislative session amends to now include an opt-in default in May of 2023 for towns that have not yet voted to opt in or opt out cannabis retail establishments and integrated licenses. This is promising for a town like mine where the likelihood of an opt-in is slim. Another recent bill would allow existing medical dispensaries to begin selling cannabis in the fall of 2021 after paying substantial fees to support social equity programs. This would give them an unfair and undeserved advantage, but get the Vermont adult use tax and regulate system started earlier than anticipated. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
With the SAFE Banking Act ready for its fourth try to get to the Senate floor and passed, there are other stories coming out of the nation's capital, and that's where the Vote Pro podcast guys rock and rule. Here's Phil Adams with the DC Report. Phil?
Hi, I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast, here with the Weed Talk News DC Report. President Biden's top pick for director of the Federal Office of National Drug Control Policy has been an active proponent of expanding access to medical marijuana. Rahul Gupta, the leading candidate for the position commonly known as Drug Czar, is the former chair of the West Virginia Medical Cannabis Advisory Board. Gupta also served on Biden's transition team as the lead on drug policy. While serving on the advisory board, Gupta publicly recognized the therapeutic benefits of cannabis and worked to institute a legal cannabis program in West Virginia, authorizing medical use of marijuana, which remains illegal under federal law. The ONDCP director is explicitly required by federal law to oppose efforts to legalize any drug banned under the Controlled Substances Act. The SAFE Banking Act was reintroduced in the House this week. Colorado Representative Ed Perlmutter was joined by more than 100 co-sponsors of both parties to refile the Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act. The legislation would allow financial institutions to serve the cannabis industry without facing federal penalties. Many banks and credit unions have balked at taking on cannabis clients because of federal sanctions. As a result, cannabis companies are forced to operate on a cash basis, complicating their compliance with financial regulations and making them vulnerable to criminal activity. In a press release, Perlmutter said, quote, "It's time to enact safe banking to align federal and state laws and reduce the public safety risk in our communities." A companion bill is expected to be introduced into the Senate next week. Another bipartisan cannabis bill was introduced in the Senate this week. The clarifying law around insurance of marijuana, or CLAIM Act, would prohibit the federal government from penalizing insurance providers simply for covering cannabis industry firms. The bill would also require the Government Accountability Office to report on any barriers to access to financial services imposed on cannabis businesses. Democratic Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey and Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky are co-sponsors of the CLAIM Act. Paul said of the legislation, quote, "The principles behind the CLAIM Act are simple. Respect the voices of the states and their people, and stop shutting out legitimate businesses from obtaining basic protections." Representative Nydia Velasquez of New York is expected to introduce a version of the bill in the House. That's the Weed Talk News DC Report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
The news is not so good in New Mexico, where their governor, Michelle Grisham, is in favor of cannabis legalization, but the legislators there are still split over all the same old issues of taxation, expungement of records, and licensing. The final bill might go to a vote on the Senate floor within a week, but advocates there are not confident. One guy who is living in the most confident cannabis nation in North America is Solomon Israel from MJ Biz Daily's International Bureau. He has our Canadian Cannabis Report. Solomon?
I'm Solomon Israel from Marijuana Business Daily International, and this is the Weed Talk News Canadian Cannabis Report. Canadian cannabis company Hexo has reported a net loss of 21 million Canadian dollars for its second quarter. Hexo increased sales of adult use cannabis during the quarter and reported a positive adjusted EBITDA figure despite the quarterly loss. CEO Sebastian St. Louis told investors that Canada's cannabis industry is getting more and more competitive. Aurora Cannabis is now taking offers for an enormous cannabis greenhouse in Medicine Hat, Alberta. The company announced it was pulling the plug on the Aurora Sun facility last November. It has not set a specific price for the greenhouse, which measures 1.7 million square feet. And Canopy Growth is raising cash once again. The company has announced a $750 million senior secured loan with the option to borrow $500 million more. The loan comes shortly after Canopy filed the shelf prospectus that would allow it to raise up to $2 billion over 25 months. You can read all those stories and more at mjbizdaily.com. I'm Solomon Israel from Marijuana Business Daily.
Here's this week's factoid courtesy of MJ Biz Daily's Factbook. Did you know that for every single dollar that is spent in the legal cannabis market, $2.50 gets injected into the economy? That fact and more available in the MJ Biz Daily Factbook, available on their website, mjbizdaily.com.
Now let's talk about the word stoner. That sets off all sorts of images of people who manage to let this plant take over their lives. It feeds the prohibitionists out there who think everyone who uses cannabis just sits around all day on the couch entertained by watching the paint dry. Well, now there is research to refute that stereotype. Researchers looked at cannabis user data conducted by the National Longitudinal Study of Adolescent to Adult Health. They concluded that cannabis use was not associated with a negative impact on exercise frequency. Now, this supports the anecdotal evidence of many who use or have used cannabis during exercise or even competitions. I've personally interviewed former NFL players who were battling injuries and used it during games as well as for recovery. Now, you see lots of yoga professionals incorporating cannabis use into their classes, and more professional athletes are investing in the cannabis industry because they've learned of the benefits to their wellness pursuit after or during their careers. Now, one guy is UFC fighter Elias Theodorou. He is the Canadian champion of the Ultimate Fighter Series, and now he's approved to use medicinal cannabis by the British Columbia Athletic Commission. He was prescribed opioids first for his bilateral neuropathy, but found more relief from pain and recovery from cannabis. Now, finally, tonight, shots for pot. That's right. Get your COVID shots in Arizona, and you might get an edible to go. The Mint locations in Arizona are offering a free edible if you show your proof of vaccination card or receipt. Now, Arizona is not alone in this gifting incentive. Washington, D.C. and the Greenhouse Dispensary in Michigan also offer free pre-rolls after you roll up your sleeve. So let's get out there and get our shots for COVID or for pot. That's Weed Talk News for this week. I'm Jimmy Young, and remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly.
PCM TV is supported by Salient Systems, a world leader in video management security, and by Revolutionary Clinics, a medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry.
Hi, I'm Ben Shire, New England rep for Salient Video Management Systems. Let me tell you what makes us different in the security space. We're your trusted advisors for all your security needs. I know how complicated the regulations are in cannabis, and working with Salient Systems will be the polar opposite of that. I give free consultations and will walk you through every step of the process so that you can get what you need at the price you can afford. We're robust, we're simple and scalable. We're Salient Systems, your solutions to all your security needs. Please contact me at the information below, and I'm looking forward to being your trusted advisor.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge, and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first. Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
We are Pro Cannabis Media. We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Well, hello there. Here we are again, another live stream from the new studio of Pro Cannabis Media. This is Cannabis Chat, and I'm Jimmy Young. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Kurt Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net.
Every week, Kurt and I get together to review some of the biggest stories in the cannabis industry. He and I talk about them. We have a few comments, and then we get reports from Canada, New York, and Washington, D.C.
And this week's no different, Jimmy. We finally have Vermont moving toward recreational cannabis with retail opening in their state. We have an old state and a new state, Colorado and Illinois, both setting cannabis sales records in July, as well as multiple efforts to legalize the cannabis plant in America, including our friend Steve D'Angelo getting involved.
But first, let's go to Deborah Borchardt in New York to check on the financial weed scene. Deborah?
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Jimmy. Well, things seem to keep going the wrong way for Charlotte's Web.
Whoa, Jimmy Young, in the weeds on the water this week. We've got the CEO of Kushko, Nick Kovacevic, with me. This guy has built his little company in 6 years from $2 billion in sales to $145 million in sales.
We can get this thing to be fully legal here in the next few years, I believe, but it's going to take far longer for the stigma to change.
I think you guys are the pro cannabis story.
And I love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Jody Roberts with Eastern Security State, and I love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Laura Beener. I'm the president and co-founder of The Healing Rose, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. It's been such an integral part of our success here at The Healing Rose.
And you know what? The best media company out there is Pro Cannabis Media. Look out for them. They'll make you famous.
Hi, I'm George, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. I also love Western Mass Hydroponics, where we've got everything you need from seed to bloom to bud, and then to smoke it afterwards.
Hi, I'm Ben Shower, New England rep for Salient Video Management Systems. Let me tell you what makes us different in the security space. We're your trusted advisors for all your security needs. I know how complicated the regulations are in cannabis, and working with Salient Systems will be the polar opposite of that. I give free consultations and will walk you through every step of the process so that you can get what you need at the price you can afford. We're robust, we're simple and scalable. We're Salient Systems, your solutions to all your security needs. Please contact me at the information below, and I'm looking forward to being your trusted advisor.
I really enjoy what I do. There's a couple different reasons for it. First of all, I've always been an accountant, and it's kind of a nerdy thing to say, but I do love accounting. And I also love helping companies. I love helping people build their companies, especially small to mid-sized startups. I've always been someone that's, in all my roles in industry, it's always been building teams, building companies, building departments. And to be honest, I love working for myself and owning my own company. So I love what I do every day.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. And you know, as a sportscaster on TV and radio for 25 years, people always thought I was an expert on sports. They used to come up to me at bars and go, "Hey, sports guy, are the Bruins going to win the Stanley Cup or what?" I didn't know then, and I don't know now. Just because I reported on sports and talked intelligently about my love for sports, I was not an expert. I was a talk show host, an anchor, a reporter. Sure enough, the same is true in the cannabis industry. Now, even though it's been around for thousands of years, research is just beginning. The difference, of course, is that there are no real experts in the cannabis space. However, we all believe that we're experts in our own field. For instance, we at Pro Cannabis Media have 75 years of combined experience in commercial media, buying, production, and strategic market planning. Now, we want to help you control your message. After all, you're probably considered an expert in your field, whether that's lighting or containers, law, interior design, or even security systems. We already have an expert in the insurance business for MRBs, that's marijuana-related businesses. Bill Perrier from Charles River Insurance is our expert. He's a member of our PCM Gold Club of experts, and he explains that one of the largest insurers in the world is now writing insurance for cannabis farmers.
Lloyd's of London, 325 years old. The standard bearer in the market is with a company called Chesterfield Brokers that have launched this parametric insurance for crops.
Insurance is all about timing, and it's a shame we couldn't have got these programs up for the farmers and the other cannabis growers who've been really affected by those West Coast fires.
We also have an accountant for the cannabis space. He's a CPA, Rick Leneve of Accounting Buds, and we rely on both of them for their expertise, and we showcase their expertise in our news and talk shows. In fact, we'll put them inside our original content, and we can talk to them. It's kind of like product placement. So show off your knowledge inside our content as we position your expertise in your field. And you do that by joining our Cannabis Gold Club of experts. That's where you get a chance to show our audience your expertise in your field. This group of entrepreneurs will serve as a referral network in order to generate leads for your business and, of course, build your expertise because it'll be shared during our weekly news and talk shows. So if you want to take advantage of our following and the original content we produce on a weekly basis, contact me, Jimmy Young, or our sales team today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
We are Pro Cannabis Media. We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Ben Shower, New England rep for Salient Video Management Systems. Let me tell you what makes us different in the security space. We're your trusted advisors for all your security needs. I know how complicated the regulations are in cannabis, and working with Salient Systems will be the polar opposite of that. I give free consultations and will walk you through every step of the process so that you can get what you need at the price you can afford. We're robust, we're simple and scalable. We're Salient Systems, your solutions to all your security needs. Please contact me at the information below, and I'm looking forward to being your trusted advisor.
Hi, Jimmy Young here, and I have to ask you, are you secure? If you're in the cannabis industry, you have to have security for your grow facility or dispensary. And we are so happy to welcome Salient Systems to our group of supporters. You get to call their rep. His name is Ben Shower at SalientSys.com. So don't even wait an hour. Call Ben Shower at 413-333-7974.
I really enjoy what I do. There's a couple different reasons for it. First of all, I've always been an accountant, and it's kind of a nerdy thing to say, but I do love accounting. And I also love helping companies. I love helping people build their companies, especially small to mid-sized startups. I've always been someone that's, in all my roles in industry, it's always been building teams, building companies, building departments. And to be honest, I love working for myself and owning my own company. So I love what I do every day.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Well, hello there. Here we are again, another live stream from the new studio of Pro Cannabis Media. This is Cannabis Chat, and I'm Jimmy Young. Hi, everyone. Welcome to We Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Kurt Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net.
Every week, Kurt and I get together to review some of the biggest stories in the cannabis industry. He and I talk about them. We have a few comments, and then we get reports from Canada, New York, and Washington, D.C.
And this week's no different, Jimmy. We finally have Vermont moving toward recreational cannabis with retail opening in their state. We have an old state and a new state, Colorado and Illinois, both setting cannabis sales records in July, as well as multiple efforts to legalize the cannabis plant in America, including our friend Steve D'Angelo getting involved.
But first, let's go to Deborah Borchardt in New York to check on the financial weed scene. Deborah?
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Jimmy. Well, things seem to keep going the wrong way for Charlotte's Web.
Whoa, Jimmy Young, in the weeds on the water this week. We've got the CEO of Kushko, Nick Kovacevic, with me. This guy has built his little company in 6 years from $2 billion in sales to $145 million in sales.
We can get this thing to be fully legal here in the next few years, I believe, but it's going to take far longer for the stigma to change.
I think you guys are the pro cannabis story.
And I love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Jody Roberts with Eastern Security State, and I love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Laura Beener. I'm the president and co-founder of The Healing Rose, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. It's been such an integral part of our success here at The Healing Rose.
And you know what? The best media company out there is Pro Cannabis Media. Look out for them. They'll make you famous.
Hi, I'm George, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. I also love Western Mass Hydroponics, where we've got everything you need from seed to bloom to bud, and then to smoke it afterwards.
Hi, Jimmy Young here, and I have to ask you, are you secure? If you're in the cannabis industry, you have to have security for your grow facility or dispensary. And we are so happy to welcome Salient Systems to our group of supporters. You get to call their rep. His name is Ben Shower at SalientSys.com. So don't even wait an hour. Call Ben Shower at 413-333-7974.
I really enjoy what I do. There's a couple different reasons for it. First of all, I've always been an accountant, and it's kind of a nerdy thing to say, but I do love accounting. And I also love helping companies. I love helping people build their companies, especially small to mid-sized startups. I've always been someone that's, in all my roles in industry, it's always been building teams, building companies, building departments. And to be honest, I love working for myself and owning my own company. So I love what I do every day.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of In the Weeds with Jimmy Young, our regular weekly podcast here at Pro Cannabis Media. And every single time I meet somebody that is well known in the industry, they usually hail from the left coast, the West Coast. And that is certainly true with our guest today, Jared Mirsky. He is from the West Coast, and he's also the CEO and founder of Wick and Mortar. He is one of the most respected marketing professionals in the business. That's a pretty accurate statement, isn't it, Jared?
I won't say that, but I'll let you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
No problem. So how challenging is it to market into an industry where, I don't know, for 80 years, everybody's been telling you it's an evil product? It's not easy, is it?
Well, first of all, I haven't been around for 80 years, so I don't know what it was quite like back then, but I can only speculate based on the stories I've heard from people I've had on my podcast, Rebranding Cannabis.
Right.
And but what I can say is, having been in the industry for nearly 13 years now, I've learned a lot. When I started, cannabis companies, weren't really companies. They were really living in what some call the black market and others call the legacy market. And I came from a time where, dispensaries were really calling themselves all the same thing. And so, having had a design background, having built an agency when I was 19, and that was called Mirsky Media, and I was working with small to medium-sized businesses, I recognized that there was an opportunity because I, live in Seattle, and Washington was one of the first states to go medical and recreational. I had an advantage as it relates to the exposure I had. So when I went into these dispensaries, I quickly realized that they all looked the same and that there wasn't really anything differentiating them from one another. Cultivators didn't want to be known or found, so it took a while to earn the respect from them because they're so private and guarded, and for good reason. That was a time when people didn't have quite the same regulations with respect to security measures. And so there's people getting robbed and, all of this stuff. So, it was pretty private. But what we started doing, or what I started doing, was, designing packaging for the dispensaries to start using. And so when the brands, or I should say the cultivators, started bringing their product in, seeing what their product was being put into, they realized that they wanted a piece of that action. So then dispensaries just started saying, well, hey, this is the guy that does all our stuff, he can do yours too. And then before I knew it, I was just doing tons of work in Washington. And then when, more states started recognizing, what was happening here, the company just continued to grow. And that was fun. And it's funny because at that time, we called ourselves Online Marijuana Design, which is not a very creative name for a creative agency, but it ultimately meant, oops, and I need to plug this in before I lose power.
There you go.
But what it ultimately meant was, if had to plug the computer in, what it ultimately meant was, now that there was an opportunity for, these companies to, bring a brand to market, they were really able to, communicate their story. And, when and I know I kind of went off on a separate tangent as it relates to online marijuana design, but when you look at how early stage these businesses are and were, they had no way to identify that there was somebody out there that was, niche focused on their specific needs. And so when you look at like the Dollar Shave Club, it's very, straight to the point, yet cheeky and humorous. And so, we knew that from a company culture perspective, we could be, unique and professional and still be able to, kind of have a name that wasn't quite as sticky as we had liked. Luckily, during that time, SEO, as it relates to domains, was a huge advantage for us. So we ranked on the first page of Google. Now, coming into that, I knew we would eventually rebrand into something that would be, more mature, but the timing was never perfect. So, it took us about 6 years, into, the industry before we decided to rebrand into Wick and Mortar.
Gotcha. And that's how it all began. I get that. You talked about regulations, and obviously this is an industry that is almost choked by regulations. And some of the stipulations obviously are different from state to state. And one of them is about not creating branding that can appeal to kids, cartoon characters and that sort of thing. Obviously, that gives even more of a challenge to what you guys do creatively, is to kind of stay within the regulations. Yet I'm going to guess you also like to be a little edgy too, right?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, you see a lot of companies in general playing it safe. So I feel like now is an opportunity to be bold and unique. The thing though about the cannabis industry is that ultimately, despite the regulations, it's really easy to, work around them if you understand them. I've helped, the LCB and the OLCB, both Washington and Oregon, better understand how to craft these rules, because ultimately none of these LCB reps have an art degree. So, we were working with a brand one time and we had designed this really cool iconic like owl, and it got declined because they said it was a cartoon character. And I was like, no, this is not a cartoon character. This is a logo. Let's talk about what the difference is between a cartoon character and a logo is. So, we had to fight for that ability, but because we did and we won, now we had earned the respect and right to help them better understand how to craft these rules and regulations. And so that made it easier for us to understand how to use them to our benefit and how to create loopholes ourselves. So that was always kind of a fun challenge for us, I guess I'd say. But when you look at brands, as a whole, Jimmy, and you look at what, companies, aren't doing, too many of them are trying to be everything to everyone and sell every product they can under the sun through one brand, as where when you look at CPG companies, like LVMH, who owns, Monet and Louis Vuitton and Belvedere and all of these brands, they're investing in IP, formulations. And they're also focusing on very niche market categories. So if you're a company looking to get acquired from a CPG company, or you want to instill and develop the values these CPG companies also create, which should be a good reflection of how to succeed, you have to individualize, these products into, a more focused, customer persona. Because if you don't, cannabis and CBD are just going to become a commodity.
Now, you're out in a very mature market, Washington State, California, Oregon, Colorado. Those are the states that were the early adapters when it comes to taking advantage of the cannabis industry. Can you describe, is the stigma still existing out there, or have people accepted it more now?
I would say there's a bigger stigma for cigarettes than there is for cannabis. Let's put it that way. If you were to walk outside, if you were to walk outside and light a joint, people would be like, they become gravitating towards you. You smoke a cigarette and people just kind of disperse.
Right.
And so it's absolutely changed.
It's interesting though. In Massachusetts, you can't smoke a joint in public unless you're in a cigarette smoking only area. Does that make sense?
I guess it depends. I guess it depends on, whether or not they're trying to keep that away from potentially children or people who, I don't know. There's no secondhand smoke really from weed, at least unless you're directly like inhaling it and breathing it back into their mouth. But
they call that a shotgun. I remember that.
They do. But in Washington State and other states alike, it's interesting because if you buy weed, you can't smoke it outside and in public. So you have to go into the woods, or you can't smoke it in your car. You can't smoke it in apartments. So you technically have to be a homeowner and then smoke it there. You wouldn't be able to smoke it on your porch technically. So it's really funky. I remember living in an apartment telling them, there's no way you're going to tell me I can't smoke weed. I'll put shower caps over the fire alarms and put wet rags under the sills of the doors and, crack open the windows and, but I'm not going to not stop smoking weed.
In a legal state. Yeah. This is what the biggest issue is for me as well. Trying to figure out how to work around that as I'm moving away from home ownership, if you will, moving into an apartment. They have those same rules and they say you have to go off property to smoke. However, they are putting in public cigarette smoking areas. So guess who's going to be challenging that clause moving forward and trying to get them to ease?
Big tobacco, absolutely.
Right? I mean, I'm going to try and make the case. I probably won't win, but Lord knows I'll shake things up. I'm not afraid to do that. Tell me about some of the projects that you might be working on now. You mentioned Social Club TV. Tell us about that.
So Social Club TV is just a partnership, and I'm also an advisor of both Ronin Content, which is the production house founded by Josh Otten, formerly partner of Prohibited.
Right.
Yep. And then he started an OTT platform called Social Club TV, which we did the rebrand for. As well. My podcast, Rebranding Cannabis, is on there, as well as the documentary we produced called A Humboldt Story, which we just won a Clio Award for, which is a huge win for the industry.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
That's a good feather in your cap, man. You should be proud of that.
I appreciate that. I'm more excited at the feather in the cap of the industry as a whole. My goal since starting my company and my agency and the brands that we're now building for ourselves has been to change the perception of cannabis on a global level, one brand at a time. So, I'm really focused on, acquiring formulations and, recipes and things that we can actually build into brands that solve unique problems for consumers. Because, at a point, people are going to want more than just getting high. As new technologies emerge, giving people, a completely different experience as it relates to how they consume cannabis and what the process was of, creating that particular product, that'll make all the difference between the value of a company and keeping a customer loyal.
We both recognize the importance of educating the public about the plant is probably the best way to break down the barriers of the stigma and get people to understand that this is a normal thing, that God put this plant on the earth for a lot of reasons, okay, to help a lot of people, and it already has. One of my biggest frustrations in the industry is battling with traditional media, and they will not allow you to have a public service announcement having anything to do with cannabis. However, you'll see plenty of anti-drug ads and addiction ads all over traditional media. How frustrating is that for you as a creative person and someone who's passionate about cannabis?
It's actually funny to me because the ads that are being perpetuated by, these groups are so terrible that they actually make people laugh and want to go buy cannabis. So, thank you for giving free advertising to everyone, because most of the people looking at those ads are already stoned on the bus or, already cannabis consumers most likely, and they don't really resonate with anyone because the people that are often creating these campaigns, and no offense, are generally like, big church groups of some sort, or, some sort of youth group type programs. And, the creative director or designer on teams design stuff primarily to make kids laugh. So it's funny that they would make things that also make me laugh when they're trying to advertise something to prohibit people from smoking weed. Yeah. But what I would say is, when looking at how people are just spending their money, is it wise for brands to put money into, public service announcements? Is that going to convert into dollars and cents? I get that there could be, associations and programs, creating, more positive media. But at the end of the day, COVID, has really put a damper on, people's ability to develop, or utilize rather certain traditional methods of marketing or advertising. It's a digital world right now, and you're going to reach way more people when focusing a budget, on that. You can certainly create far more, I would say just
impactful
eyes. Well, I was gonna say eyes. You can just convert far more eyes into, subscribers or what have you by, utilizing, digital technologies versus, trying to leverage, a billboard, which I think is fun, but
yeah, we talk about controlling the message. You have to educate the industry on how they can control their own message and their own brand, and then sharing it through social media that everybody has access to.
That's right. That's right. Yep. And that's something that I was going to say, Jimmy, that's something that, cannabis companies in Canada should be looking at and taking advantage of, because they have very limited opportunities as it relates to marketing. So they're actually doing public service announcements and sponsoring those in partnership with someone who is, creating the content so that it's not coming from them, but it's coming from another agency. They're just sponsoring it, right? So when sponsoring that public service announcement, that's unrefutable education. And if, it's Snoop Dogg saying, don't smoke weed, and drive, it's done by an agency like us or someone else. And then it's again sponsored by the public company or the group, so to speak. And so that gives them the ability to develop some, marketing capabilities while moving through, the regulations, if you will.
And how many times, Jared, have you heard the expression or someone say to you, cannabis has saved my life, cannabis has changed my life?
All the time. All the time.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is. I would say it's changed my life. I would say it's saved my life in different ways, and it's saved others. But I think it's, my calling and my passion, and it's, something I love doing, great things with, because it's, ultimately going to help people who, could benefit from the plant. It's going to give them the ability to have more access to it. And it starts with being good storytellers and helping, really perpetuate legitimate education. And that's one of the biggest issues. People are still continuing to brand their products with indica, sativa, and hybrid, yet everything's a hybrid. Because, back when you were probably in your early teens, shit was at like 6%, 8%, maybe tops. So, over the course of then and now, stuff's been crossbred to produce, more THC. And at that point, everything's a hybrid, and, our endocannabinoid systems are all different. So, an indica for you, quote unquote, would be different for me. Right. So then you've got like decarboxylation. When you smoke weed, Jimmy, do you know that you're losing like 70 to 80% of the plant's entire like medicinal profile?
Is that why we like to use the concentrates? Is that where that is evolving now into the edibles and the tinctures and that sort of thing?
Yes, but even through decarboxylation, which is the heat applied to the process of even just extracting that oil, you're still losing a large aspect of the profile through that. And then when you're using a dab rig, low temp dab, you're gonna get more of that terpene profile, but it's still never like, you may get like 35%, maybe 40% if you're lucky, but all of the other medicinal benefits, modalities, and terpenes are being destroyed.
Huh. That's interesting.
So, we've recently, partnered and invested in a company called Harvest Direct Enterprises. And so what they've been able to do is create a technology that develops the product in a way of, lossless activation. So as it goes through the extraction method, it extracts the whole part of the plant and keeps it 100% intact, thus never degrading the product. And now it's like complete spectrum versus like, your full spectrum where things may be reintroduced. And so this is everything in one. True medicinal properties now that a physician could literally make a recommendation for.
Yeah, well, we all know that eventually this might happen. I want to ask you a little bit more about the big marijuana companies out there. Those MSOs, those multi-state operators are becoming almost villainous inside the industry because a lot of people feel that they're going to price out the local entrepreneur or the social equity applicants. And are you fearful of that?
That hasn't necessarily been an area that I've been, entirely focused on, just because, we do work with some MSOs and we do work with, social equity groups. And so, I believe that, a lot of these MSOs are actually starting to, bring more, diversity into the group, thus creating, I would say more partnerships with these social equity, licenses and groups. So honestly, I haven't really seen nor heard much of that, and to be honest, I'm a little surprised I haven't, but, maybe it's something that was a thing of the past. And now, with, MSOs bringing, again, more diversity into, their groups, they're starting to see the opportunity as it relates to partnering versus, trying to tear any of that down.
It's interesting. Massachusetts has only had a adult use program since 2018. Washington State's been around for a little bit longer than that, let's just say. But even in New Jersey, you're starting to hear it too. It seems to be when there is a new set of laws and a new opportunity, those that are properly capitalized try to get their foot in the door as quickly as possible because they have access to capital. So it's a big difference between how the Washington state market evolved and how the East Coast and newer markets like Illinois are evolving. It's a fascinating time to be documenting some of this and be part of this historic movement in so many ways. Let me ask you a question. A lot of people come to you with an idea, or maybe they're already a startup business. They come to you and they talk to you about the value of a logo. Is the value of a logo, how important is that versus just the brand?
Well, the logo is not obviously the brand. It is, a communication tool for all of those of you who are listening who, generally look at, a brand identity as, your brand. It is just the identity of your brand. The brand is the promise that you make to your customer. And, when looking at, a logo, you have to understand, how does it interact with the world today? And, if you have intentions of, creating, illustrious, advertisements with, high resolution photos and blasts of color, well, then maybe you don't want your logo to be so complex that it gets lost in, all of the communication pieces you're trying to share. There's a variety of styles. Many take and, look at, less is more in most cases,
Right.
and that's how things become a bit more timeless and iconic, versus dated, and I tend to gravitate towards, building out our own font types, specifically, or, our typefaces for logos, because again, it gives us the ability to give our clients something that they can, trademark. We want to make sure that, companies who are, coming to market, who are looking at building out an identity for their brand, understand that, you can't go to Shutterstock and pull an icon or a logo off there, change the typeface to your own thing and then call it a day. That doesn't work like that. You can't do that. And if you look at the rules, they'll tell you that you can't do that too, which is weird, because why would you sell logos if you can't use them as, your own proprietary stuff? But nonetheless, you just have to be mindful of those things, because if you're trying to, build a company to sell one day, well, you may be building a brand that is, for all intents and purposes, set to fail before you've even started, because you don't even realize that you're violating, other people's IP. So, you may get big, then get sued. That's not going to be good, because then you're going to have to either buy them out, or you're going to have to completely rebrand, which is going to be way more expensive down the road. And we do a lot of rebrands, I can tell you that much right now.
I bet. What's the biggest mistake companies make when they go to market and want to push out their story to the public? What's the biggest mistake most people do when they start up a business like that?
The biggest mistake is generally they try to emulate or echo another brand they saw without really putting much creative insight into, what it is that they're launching and why they're launching it. I get that, it makes sense to look at another brand and go, oh, well, they're not in my state yet. I could just do what they're doing and then dominate my category here before they do. Sure. That might make sense if, brands now didn't and become more aware of the fact that they could now license their brands through contract manufacturing deals in other states much faster than by way of, setting up these facilities. Again, when you look at the acquisition Kellogg made when they purchased RX Bar for $600 million, RX Bar didn't own the facility they manufactured their products in. So why were they purchased for $600 million? Well, because they owned the IP behind their formulations. They had a great brand and they had good distribution. Imagine how much more difficult it is to get distribution in cannabis for a CPG company who has a lot of money to invest in branding and marketing growth, who can't get the same access to the distribution. So if you think about it, distribution, despite the numbers being less than what you might make by owning a facility in one state initially because of the margins, you're going to find it much easier to gain success nationally and have a much more valuable company. And over time, you'll be making way more money than you will be with that, because then you'll command a much larger audience. You'll be able to launch more products. You'll be able to have more of these relationships. And that's where the big play is at.
Do you believe, there obviously exists a cannabis culture. I mentioned the 4 states, the Colorados, the Washington, Oregon, and California. The East Coast is still starting right now. I mean, like I said, Massachusetts, first East Coast state, only been around for about 2.5 years. There's over 100 dispensaries now in the state, and they are still putting out licenses on a somewhat regular basis for a change. What's the emerging market? Can you describe what you think is the emerging market for cannabis, and is it tied to the wellness industry?
Well, because some states we're talking about are still medicinal and others are, recreational, I think that there is a huge need for maturity in, these new states. And what's weird is, being over here, and I'm going to Michigan on Thursday to go meet with some clients, and we've got clients in Massachusetts and Maryland and DC. And so, when I go over there, it's, before some of those states were even, medical, let alone recreational, the black market or legacy market, I suppose, whatever you want to call it, in the states that are still not legal or medical is really interesting because it's like a higher level of what it was when I started in Washington 12 years ago. It's like an advanced space of the black market, right? Or the legacy market, or however, whatever you might want to call it.
Legacy market's not taking debit cards yet, though, are they?
Yeah, no, they are not. No. Venmo, maybe Cash App or something. I don't know. I get people trying to sell me weed through my Instagram all the time. I'm like, no, dude, I'm good, bro. I got my own stash. It's great. It's funny, but got to support the hustle. You got start somewhere, right?
That's right.
But at the end of the day, it's going to be interesting what happens, when federal legalization occurs and, these larger manufacturing facilities are now able to distribute across borders. What is going to be the biggest differentiating value proposition smaller brands have in the market if their products are being commoditized, right? So, people at the end of the day, if they can get the same quality and pay less for it, they probably will. That is just the way the world works, unfortunately.
Isn't that supply and demand and capitalism and all that? I mean,
it is, but I think then this should be a key, for everyone listening, this should be a key indicator that if, again, looking at RX Bar, they own the intellectual property of their formulation. They weren't selling nuts or just one ingredient like cannabis is or like CBD is. They were selling a formula, an ingredient, a recipe. Hershey's doesn't sell cacao like that might be CBD to us. It's Hershey's chocolate, and that's made in their Hershey's bars. And then it's also used in all of their, sub-brands. So now that IP is increasing in value, as is the parent company, as is the brand equity. So that is the play, because again, if you don't have IP, you have, nothing.
Right. Absolutely. Well, Jared Mirsky, you have a lot going for you. Wick and Mortar is your agency. How do people find out? Actually, all you have to do is Google Jared Mirsky and a whole bunch of stuff comes up on Google.
You can find me at jared.mirsky on Instagram. I'm on Clubhouse actively all the time. My podcast, Rebranding Cannabis, on every audio platform and YouTube, as well as Social Club TV. You can find Wick and Mortar, wickandmortar.com, and at Wick and Mortar on Instagram. Other than that, I appreciate you having me on the show, and I look forward to, more conversations.
Absolutely. And that's what it's about. It's about communication, conversation, and we miss the socialization that has always been part of this industry at the conventions and that sort of thing. I'm looking forward to getting those shots, getting everybody vaccinated so we can get back to hugging and shaking hands again. How about you?
Oh my gosh, you are telling me. I am just aching to get out and start speaking at conferences again. I was speaking at 50 to 100, a year at one point. And then, I was traveling so much. I had no time for, actual life.
Yeah.
But
well, it's work balance life, man.
That's right.
That's a key. It's not easy
That's
to
right.
do.
It's not.
I don't care what you're into. All right. Jared Mirsky from
Brother, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us on In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Hi, I'm Ben Shire, New England rep for Salient Video Management Systems. Let me tell you what makes us different in the security space. We're your trusted advisors for all your security needs. I know how complicated the regulations are in cannabis, and working with Salient Systems will be the polar opposite of that. I give free consultations and will walk you through every step of the process so that you can get what you need at the price you can afford. We're robust, we're simple and scalable. We're Salient Systems, your solutions to all your security needs. Please contact me at the information below, and I'm looking forward to being your trusted advisor.